Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejohn Sarawik. Sejohn.
Good morning, everybody. Good bright and early morning to you all.
Or good afternoon, if you're the type of person who listens to this after lunch.
I mean, I guess that's true. I'm greeting you from the morning, so I figure that I think the proper way to do this, the right etiquette, would be to say good morning, even if it is the afternoon to you, right?
I guess that's true. I'm greeting you from this moment in time. For a moment like this, it will last a lifetime, because it's on digital tape or something.
I don't know if that's true, because if we don't pay for the server space, it definitely won't stick around.
Yeah, but I keep it on, like, an external hard drive. I'm having it etched onto my back, like in Rush Hour 3 with the tattoo that's the blacklist of all the Yakuza members. That's another movie we saw in 2007, and I'm glad that we didn't cover that one.
Yeah, I can't wait until the aliens discover the Say Report black box.
That's going to be either... I mean, like, we could become Jesuit figures. We could become messiahs in the eyes of the aliens.
The spice must flow.
Oh, Dune. Hi, Sejohn. What's going on?
Not too much. I told you, man. So this is me sitting here on a Sunday morning, not a Saturday morning, as I foolishly still thought it was, because I've been up for like 36 hours.
So I guess it's a Saturday second morning if you haven't been to sleep yet.
Saturday 2, as I like to call my Sundays. Thank you very much. God can keep his Sundays. I went on a little bit of a modding roller coaster ride. I think I mentioned that I opted for a Steam version of the Mass Effect Legendary Edition after some serious time with it on PlayStation. And the big reason that I did that was because I wanted to start getting inside and start fucking around, because there was just so much that I was reading about how much Legendary Edition really was in the community's eyes. Like, I want to make sure that I'm being clear about this. This is not me promoting this as fact, because I don't know how much of this is fact from what I've been like experiencing and reading. But the vanilla edition of Legendary Edition of Mass Effect is considered to be a little bit of a wreck by the community. Now, that's not the version that came out on PlayStation, which is kind of what got me intrigued, was that by the time it hit consoles, or when it hit consoles, like, there's like different stuff going on in different versions. There's clearly different assets and like layers and DLCs and all of that sort of shit that are behaving in different ways. And it's really hard to parse out what is actually in the original game, what people assumed was in the game and wasn't there. So, for instance, like the gay romance options, right? I think we
briefly touched on it last week. Yeah,
and I think that it's something that a lot of people think about Mass Effect, because like the first game caught a ton of heat for the idea that you could have a romance with a male figure. What I didn't realize was like those options were extremely kneecapped at some point. Like there are mods that restore gay romance options because the files exist. There are lines recorded. There's assets available. So people have pulled those out of the back files and recreated that work, and then there are mods available to put onto your game to put that stuff back in. Now, that stuff was like not even there in the original release. So when people talk about that not being part of the game, there's this weird element of like it never was part of the game. Like so at what point is a piece of content created, exists in the world, and an artist says, nah, we're not, that's not meeting my vision for whatever reason. Could be capitalistic, could be terrible reasons, could be whatever, but the final product that they put out doesn't include that, right?
Yeah.
So that's not part of the piece, right? But the problem is like we live in a world in which the audience like assumption like has a lot of weight. I mean, this is a way off tangent, but kind of in that same vein is like, did we talk about the creators of Yesterday getting sued by fans because
you said you didn't want to talk about it? Well, it was something that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, I didn't want to talk about it at the time because it was so angering because they won. Like they were basically given like this golden ticket because these two fans who saw the movie, I think we discovered, like, you and I, when we were digging into it, figured out it was like 3 years after
Yeah,
the
it was
fact,
years
right?
after the fact. It'd be one thing if they
Saw
went to the theater.
saw yesterday on a rental and were so pissed that Anna de Armas, who was in 10 seconds of the preview as no named character, no promises made. There's some indication that she's going to be flirtatious with the main character of the movie yesterday, and that's about it. And
I
so they
honestly would be
watched.
surprised if her entire role in the film was longer than those 10 seconds that we see
Yeah,
in the trailer. Like, it's just
she's
one of those
got she
blink and you
yeah,
see, oh, look, another
exactly.
celebrity into this guy because of what he's done.
So this trailer trash, which is what it is, it's this piece of trailer trash that these people saw once in some preview that is still technically findable online in one preview out of many of yesterday, was enough for them to convince a judge that they deserved compensation of more than just their money back for the rental. I mean, like that's the thing, is it compounded more and more the more that I read about the case. Because not only did they rent a movie 3 years after the fact for a woman that's not even listed on the IMDb. If they're such big Ana de Armas fans that it personally hurt them that she was not in that movie, you'd think they'd be more familiar with her work. But okay, like I don't like, but I am not a judge, and a judge found that they had the right to this complaint, right? And that's the kind of world that we live in. And when we talk about video games, and we have all this stuff about like perception and the ways that games are received. I mean, like look at what happened with The Last of Us 2, right? Like that entire game like was a dumpster fire on in the community circles before it had even come out. Like one or two guys had gotten a hold of like versions of it, and I think one of them like, didn't even play the game. He just snapped the disc in half on Twitch, and everybody gave him bought him a round of beers. I don't like fucking understand that one. And then like other people played it, and they like did nothing but like actively like go against what the game was asking them to do in places, and then they bitched about how the game was purposely hard or overly simple. Like there was all sorts of weird shit going on. People didn't even have the game in their hands. Like it's this weird thing where like people just get this weird perception of what they're going to be owed by a thing, and when they don't get it, they're very upset by that nowadays. And like I don't know, is this new? It feels like it's gotten worse over the years. So here I am, like playing Mass Effect and having all of these weird feelings about like what it's supposed to be and what I was told it was going to be and my feelings on what it is. And like I finally realized I was like, I have the technology. We can rebuild this. Like, why don't we go in and see what the community really wanted from this game? So like I just started going through and trying out all sorts of different mods. And I had been kind of avoiding one of the larger ones because I mean, first of all, it was a 4 GB patch to the game. It was going to take, an hour to sort out. It depended on a bunch of other mods being installed. Other mods depend on it being installed. So it's called the Mass Effect Legendary Edition Community Patch. Technically, Community Patch 2, I think is what it is, which it's just an update of the original community patch that had come out for it. And it restores a bunch of stuff. It cleans up a lot of things. When I first started playing Mass Effect Legendary Edition on Steam on my computer, there was some really weird stuff with the face masks. For anybody that doesn't know how they model like characters, like they'll build a character's basic body structure, and then certain aspects of them will be free, kind of free assets, like the face, which will have all of its own modeling, and then it's literally just like a mask just layered over the mannequin of this person's costume and all that shit, and then it walks around. It's a horrifying aspect, and it is
I mean, you certainly
super.
made it sound horrifying.
Well, that's the thing is like it's super horrifying on Steam. On the PC version of vanilla, because you can see like the line that traces out the face and the way that it doesn't quite sit right on the head, and sometimes it moves in ways that the rest of the body doesn't. It was legitimately upsetting for certain characters, specifically Captain Anderson, Keith David's character, who I fucking love Keith David and fucking love that character. So like it's like, no, Daddy, what have they done to you? Like, it was horrifying, and this fixed it. This community patch goes through and fixes like things like that, right? Like, but as I said, it is the world of modding. I'm very very new to, right? And Mass Effect. The other reason I wanted to start with Mass Effect is that it has a very helpful community in terms of the modding and in terms of what's been created already. So there's like a mod manager for it. There's lists upon lists with descriptions about like what you're going to need to do to move certain files around to get certain effects, or if you want to continue to use certain mods and not other mods, how to like tweak mods that you're getting and all that sort of stuff. And again, there's a lot of hand holding going on specifically with this set because so many people cared about this game and the community is so active with it still and all of that sort of stuff. So it just felt like a good place to start learning how to do this shit. Plus, I wanted to see what the game looked like. And so I found myself on just going on this journey of just installing mods, getting the patch set up, getting other mods sorted in order to like restore lost dialogue in games. I've been trying to avoid anything that outright adds stuff. Like I'm not running around like Yoshi, right? Like I'm not playing as like Samus in the Mass Effect universe. Like I maybe will eventually get to that point where I do that. But a couple of things are stopping me from doing that. First of all, I part of the project is just kind of trying to figure out what is the game that people talk about when they say they love Mass Effect versus what I played. And then on top of that, it was also to teach myself how to do some of the stuff, and some of that modding is crazy deep. Like this stuff is very simple. I throw it into the mod manager, it pops right in, and I don't have to worry about it. That's those files, like when you play as other characters or when you get like cool costumes from other games. Like there's all sorts of stuff where people have brought in like Skyrim armor into it and shit like that. That's when you have to start going in and really fucking around with files, and I'm not there yet. And it's been wild. I mean, like it's been really really interesting to go through and play stuff and see. I have also learned a lot about just Mass Effect in general, just like the ways that the Paragon versus Renegade, like good versus bad path go. Have really really started to pick up on the fact that the issue where the game kind of forces you into the same choices no matter what you do by the time you get to the end of game 3, I have really come to solidify my feelings that that has always been that game and people were just full of shit at the time, because I have played a pretty much straight Renegade run at this point on the PC versus my pretty much straight Paragon run on the PlayStation. And I know I've said a lot about how things were different and back and forth and all of that stuff, but this is pretty glaring that like there are straight up events lines. 90% of what you say when you choose the bad option over the good option is the exact same line with the exact same delivery. There's a few key moments where that's not the case, but generally whatever you pick, you're always going to say the same thing. What you're doing is you're basically choosing subtext, which I think is something that is really subtle, that is really hard to explain to people. And I think it also, this is one of the things that leads to everybody complaining about like, hey, I picked this dialogue option and then what they say doesn't quite match what I picked. Why? Well, it's because they're saying one line for all three options in front of you. You have a Renegade and Paragon and Neutral, right? But no matter which one of those three you pick, you're going to say the same line. What you're picking is what you mean behind it, right? And that's cool, but also not the way that that game is like explained to people. So yeah, no shit, like you're gonna find yourself making these same choices and find yourself in these same situations no matter what you choose, because because it is really only one script except for key moments. It's all about like your intention behind what you say, and it does slowly change like inflection, I guess. Like I'd have to go back and start looking at that, but the line is the same. So like it just becomes this weird like balancing act of how much time do we want to spend with an actor to get every single different type of line read for this versus, I mean, what is the audience going to apply to this after what they've been doing for the last 20 minutes? So we don't really need a different line read. It could be the same thing. They're going to apply their own subtext to it, right? It's a crazy ass like kind of rabbit hole to fall down, and I cannot believe that this all because PlayStation put up Legendary Edition as like the free game at the end of the month. PlayStation Plus, a service that I often considered to be kind of on the downswing of its height of good intention that it was when it started, like has once again kind of put me in this position where I have this game now that I otherwise probably never would have played that has now become like an obsession for me.
Yeah, that I can't remember the last time that happened with a PlayStation. It was Infernax, but it wasn't PS Plus. It was Xbox Game Pass, because I became obsessed with that game, to the fact that now that they've announced it's going off of Game Pass, I now own it on both the Switch and the PlayStation, because I need to have my Infernaxian goodness. I get it. I get that part of it. The Mass Effect thing, I guess I owe an apology to River City Girls 2 for saying that there's clearly just one script and they just had every character read each line and then they're going to feed it back to you because at least that's not what the game was sold on.
Oh,
Mass
well,
Effect
I mean,
being sold on that this is big story, and then I mean what you're talking about makes perfect sense. You have them pick the good answer or the bad answer. It's the same line read. They put their own meaning behind it, and then in the background, like a bead goes into your red jar or your blue jar, and
right.
whichever one is higher, at any given time, that's the path you're on.
Right. And I will say that like that it is done amazingly well.
Yeah,
Knowing that that's what they're doing, like they do it they it's perfect. The times when they need to make subtle changes, they make them. The times when they don't have to, they just don't. But the problem is that you're kind of sold on this idea of replayability that you can go back into this because that's the other thing is that I always looked at Mass Effect as these giant ass story games that were really daunting and I think for the entirety of Legendary Edition, in both cases, I put in 55 hours max, and that was me going out of my way to do extra shit. I'm the kind of guy that goes around and completes what I can. I didn't hit every planet for their resources, but like I did every loyalty mission for every character. I made sure to pick up every character. I made sure to go and meet and finish off like little subtle ones. There's silly shit like you'll walk by an alien who's talking about eating fish out of the pond in like the like main area, like basically like the Washington D.C. of this universe. They're like, yeah, I'm gonna go down to the reflecting pool and catch fish and eat it out of there. And you're like, I don't know if that's a good idea. And if you like go and talk to a groundskeeper about it, they'll be like, "There's no fish. Tell that guy to fuck off." And so you go back and you tell that guy like, "Hey man, before you get yourself in trouble, there's not even fish in there." And he's just like, "Oh, thanks." Like that's it. It's just like a weird random thing you can do off to the side as you're like running around. You randomly hear a guy talk about this, and suddenly you pop a quest. It's in that era of the RPG, right? Where you're like, I have to save the universe. There's these people coming that are going to enslave the human race. I need to stop it now. Oh, that guy's going to go steal fish. I got to do something about that.
but if
It's like
that
what?
guy is in jail when the attack happens, he's still going to draw the laser beams to him. He's in the jail. He gets hit with the laser beam. Everybody in the jail is a casualty. If he
Yeah.
doesn't go to jail because of what you did, he's off in a field somewhere crying because he wants fish from a reflecting pool, and he's the only one who dies. It's
Yeah.
the trolley
It's just
problem distilled into RPG stupid side quests.
it's just it is really all about like the promise and the subtext of what you bring to what's going on and what you want out of the game, which kind of leads me back to the whole like wanting to make the game what the community sees it as now because they're the ones that are making this game exist as it is. And just there's so much support from the community to create a very specific type of game that the shell of that game simply just isn't. And so it's really, really interesting to me when people are still kind of talking about Mass Effect. And like for me, like going back to Mass Effect, you know, uh, there, but for the grace of God, like I figured out like I should do this, right? How many people play Mass Effect Legendary Edition on any console that's not their PC, and like that's their experience with Mass Effect, and that's what they talk about with people, and the majority of people they talk to probably fine, but there's going to be a certain subsect of people where they're going to talk about Mass Effect, and they're going to get clap back, they're going to get shit back from people that are just like, well, I prefer this way and I prefer that way, and that's like that's not my Mass Effect, and it's just like okay, like the community can get like that, right? Like they can be. I mean, we talked about how avid they are about this game and then the ways in which they reacted to the developers. Never mind people that don't play their version of it, right? It's just it gave me an eye into the fandom. The I don't want to call it toxic because it's not entirely. There are parts of the fandom that are not toxic. There are parts of the fandom that are. But it gave me a look into a very deep fandom that I don't often find myself in these circles simply by nature of I don't know what's good, right? Like the show is if anything proof that like you and I simply just kind of take in everything and filter a lot of stuff and people don't consume things the way you and I consume things. So I don't often find myself in rabid fan bases like that are doing this kind of heavy lifting to I'm putting air quotes around this
It's like, yeah.
correct a piece of media like they have here. I think about it like the same way as that like Star Wars fans rally around the Topher Grace cut of episode one, right? Like, or it's actually the full original trilogy. Didn't he cut the original trilogy
I
into
think he
one
cut the
movie?
original trilogy into one
Yeah,
movie. Yeah.
right, yeah, like the weird, like, there are with these weird projects that come up in these fandoms, and they come from the not so nice sides of these fandoms. So and part of it is I also try and avoid a lot of projects like this, is because it feels really kind of marred in like this bullshit of like they don't know what the creators of this piece didn't know what they were doing with this. I know what to do with this, right? There's like that weird aspect to it, that I don't love, but I wanted to try it with this one. You know, like I said, a couple of pieces fell into the right place at the right time for me that it made sense for me to try this. And it did lead to like a 20-hour experience yesterday of me just sitting here installing various mods, uninstalling pieces of it, and getting the game up and on its feet finally last night and playing for a few hours. And it was crazy. It's just been a crazy 36 hours.
All right. So as somebody who's never played Mass Effect, never really had any desire to play Mass Effect, remembers vaguely the controversy around the ending of Mass Effect 3.
Yeah.
Everything that you've just told me doesn't explain the why of that reaction, but I now understand the how of that reaction. Because you talk about Star Wars fans and the way that they feel about their media and what they've attached themselves to. I think, and this is a crazy theory that I'm about to inject into the episode, but it all goes back to books in this really weird way. And the first time we experience something inside of a new medium that is essentially the dopamine rush that reading gives you in terms of like imaginative things and the way that you're transported by it, when that happens for a piece of media, it sort of supplants. Like, do you understand what I'm trying to say here? I don't even think I understand what I'm trying to say, but
so
like,
so let me go down this. I'm gonna get in the car with you. I'm not sure where you're driving us, but
all
let me
right,
get in the
cool.
car. But there is this idea that like as new and newer technologies come along, right, and we create new forms of media to consume. This goes for the invention of the camera, the invention of the video game, like all of that stuff. Like we're always taking further and further steps that seem to be taking more and more away from the audience, right? Like think about like radio and the audio format introducing the ways in which this should be read, right? Like oh, suddenly I'm not the one applying the voice to this book, somebody else is applying it for me.
Yeah.
Then television, they're applying these images to this book and those voices of this book more than they. Video games kind of took a step in the other direction finally in saying, okay, the controls of the character are back in your hand, but still all this other stuff is still ours, right? Like narrative is still our thing, visual is still our thing. Like we are still telling you how to consume this thing. We're just giving you the ability to move left and right. And then eventually it became a 3D space, and the more and more control we started to kind of give back to the audience, I'm saying we, like the collective we,
No, I understand that.
like
The
the
royal
more and more
we.
control that was given back to the audience for video games, the more they kind of want it, right? Like to the point where you evolve down into things like the Kinect or VR headsets or AR, right? Like the ways in which people want control back in their lives, in the ways that they consume media, in the ways they want to, I think definitely stems from the nature of a lot of the first consumption of quote unquote media was writing, in which case as the audience you apply the voice, you imply the intention, you imply the subtext, you are the ones that are bringing so much to the table when you're reading word on the page that you're just not with things like audio and video. And so when video games kind of started to give you that promise back of, hey, you can be back in the driver's seat for this sort of stuff, and in not in the same ways, but like, hey, for the first time ever you can control the narrative, like, whoa, like that's a huge promise to make. And to have that promise not be truly fulfilled can definitely be disappointing. And so yeah, like to your thing, I can get how this sort of stuff happens. I don't know why.
I don't think we'll ever know why. I don't.
Right. I don't know why you. I don't think you can. I think this is something that companies have been trying to figure out for literally like centuries. Is how do we figure out what people will click with? And the closest I think we've gotten is like YouTube really is good at tracking your
tracking that
algorithms,
way of
using,
doing it. Yeah.
yeah, like using, hey, this person's been Googling a lot about home renovations lately on YouTube. You're going to get a lot of recommendations about like house flipping and all of a sudden and things like that, or HGTV clips or shit and shit like that, right? Like, so there is. Like what they've decided is active monitoring is the only way to get even close, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right, but that attempt to give as much control back to the audience as possible because it's clearly what they want while not losing complete control is a balancing act that we've been seeing companies play with for a while now
I mean,
in gaming specifically. I mean,
there's also the fact that controlling the narrative is not necessarily creating the narrative. You're
right.
in control of how an existing narrative is going to go. You need to understand that it's a partnership. You're not in control. You don't get to just, rip through space time because you're the creator and kill the boss from the beginning of the game and then
Yeah.
avoid everything. You still
Well,
have
and
to
then
go through everything that was
yeah,
created, and
yeah,
you're in
and
control of how you
there is
approach it.
this weird and there's this weird layer for me where it becomes this thing where I'm not only losing control of the game as I'm playing through, right? Like, so this is part of this is definitely part of what kind of I don't want to say aggravated, but definitely kind of caught my attention as I was playing Mass Effect, right? Is that idea that I was like, I'm not as in control of this as I was promised I was going to be, am I? And like, raised eyebrow, continue to play, enjoyed my time, right? But there is also then my own bullshit on top of that, where I have now found myself kind of developing this character in a way and I'm then faced with a choice where I'm just like, well, I want to see what happens there, or that would be really cool if I said that thing right now, or like went in that direction right now. But that's not what I think I would do after, 40 hours of playing this character. I think I need to do this other thing, right? And that is something that I know that I am bringing to that. That is like, I didn't have to. Like, you can do whatever you want. That's literally what they're saying to you is you have a choice right now. You can make whatever choice you want and we'll make it work. It might be clunky, it might not work dialogue wise, and there might be some weird, but you can still make it. And like I am saying no, right? So now I'm losing control even in my own head. It just started getting really like I could definitely really understand why someone would be disappointed in the Mass Effect series after playing the Legendary Edition 2.5 times now, right? Like I can see where that disappointment came from. I still am never going to understand the reaction of, take to the streets and burn it all down that people really had with that attitude. I mean, even in the modding community, the endings are up in the fucking air. There's the happy ending version in which like everybody
Happy
survives.
ending.
Anybody that knows the end of that game knows that that's not necessarily the case in that game. But like, there's also the restore the original ending mod where there's a subsect of the community that does not like that they corrected it. And even within that community, they will say we don't love the original ending of Mass Effect, but it was the intended ending of this game. So we are going to restore this back to its intended purpose.
Yeah,
And it's just like, well,
at the
right.
time, it was like, where do you get ownership over the ending? You were just renting that narrative. Like, it was one of those things where I'm like, this is a moment in history in terms of entertainment where does the creator stick by what they originally intended or do they kowtow to fan demand? And when they were like, we're doing a different ending, it is, oh, okay, like, that sets a really dangerous precedent. And I think
and
like,
it's not the
it
first
did.
thing. Yeah, I think it's important to remember though that like the other side of all this is it's a company trying to appease an audience so that they can sell a product, and this is not unusual. I mean, like I think of shit like the Jason Todd fiasco in the early '90s when DC had no intention of killing him off, but some smartass thought it would be funny to put a community poll out there to see what people wanted to happen to Jason Todd. And famously, a bunch of people not really thinking that DC would actually
They'll
abide
never
by it
actually kill Jason
voted
Todd.
to kill Jason Todd as a joke. So overwhelmingly, like it was kill Jason Todd. And so they did. And then, like, for a long time, there was a lot of regret in the fan base. Like, some people very upset that it had happened because they just didn't think it would, but they did, and like all this stuff. So what did they do? They brought back Jason Todd eventually. Now, like, that's comic books, so they kind of have the benefit of the medium in that, like, that kind of shit just happens.
There's only three
But
people who will never be resurrected in comic books, and that is Uncle Ben, Thomas, and Martha Wayne.
yeah, that's bullshit. We've seen plenty of.
I know we've
Thomas
seen
and
them
Martha
all
Wayne.
come back. I know it's just like, but it's one of those situations where
Yeah.
even those people who are like, Spider-Man gets Uncle Ben back, he's not Spider-Man anymore.
I do think that it'd be interesting to point out that I think we've seen more Thomas Wayne coming back than anything, right?
Yeah.
Which just kind of tells you something about that. But yeah, the idea that like the Waynes should always stay dead and Uncle Ben should always stay dead because of the deep motivation for these characters, even that's going out the window.
Even that's gone out the window. It's gone. My other favorite one growing up and going to comic book stores, which is really where all this Mass Effect talk puts me, is those Saturdays that I would spend from 10 to 4 just sitting in the comic book store talking about this stuff. Like crazy wasted days that I
Yeah.
would totally do again.
As opposed to this moment right now in time.
Well, you know, we're not together, and there is an MST3K on in the background. It was a weird time in my life. I'll admit that. But that whole list of Uncle Ben and the Waynes, and it was like, yeah, Gwen Stacy can never come back, and I'm like, are you reading Spider-Man right now? She's back literally right now. She was cloned by the Green Goblin and then made to carry his children and then murdered.
Sometimes I hate comic books.
Oh yeah,
Man.
But I remember that thing. He was like, she could never come back. I'm like, literally the story we're reading right now. It's how Gwen Stacy is back.
It is because like we as consumers want more control over the shit we consume, and I think that that's a fair and good place to start from, right? Like if I were to put this in terms of food, right? Like questioning like what's happening with your food and researching and changing your habits based on that and demanding companies change their habits on that. I support all of that sort of shit. Because like it, you know, we literally were putting chemicals in food to preserve it that oops turns out was giving everybody cancer. Like we put a stop to that kind of shit. Like that's good progress. Applying that to something like art becomes a much stickier situation for me personally, and you know that's telling about who I am as a person, I guess. But like the ways in which people apply that consumer mentality, that ode consumer mentality, to art starts to get really it starts to grind my gears in a lot of ways, you know, and it goes both ways though, because we are now also currently sitting in the middle of kind of I think it's probably just the eye of the storm of the streaming wars, like the nonsense bullshit that's going on with streaming services currently, left, right, and center. Just like I can't. There's not a streaming service I can point to right now that's doing it right. You know, and a few months ago that could have been HBO. Before that, it might have been Disney. At some point, that might have been Netflix. But right now, it's nobody. Right? Like everybody is kind of struggling with the ways in which they were promised a thing, given a thing, being told this was going to be there, and now it's not. And some people are just, I'm not going to engage. I'm going to cancel my subscription and walk away. Totally understandable. But some people are like, no, we're owed this. We were told this was going to be what this is. I'm not going to drop this. And I just don't know if I don't know if I have that fight in me for various reasons. But like, it's like one step removed from the movie making process is the movie like selling process, and I instantly feel like we don't really have a say in how they give it to us, right? But if I was talking about a specific movie, I definitely feel like I'd be like, well, yeah, people should have a way to watch this film. It's really, it puts us all in a really interesting situation nowadays, the ways in which these media companies have over the years coalesced to what fans have demanded, and in some cases not, right? Like completely just shut down what fans have demanded. But we now currently live in an era where we have like the takesies backsies of the Snyder cut and the Mass Effect ending and all of this shit out there that people are just like, this is what we are owed, and companies are just like, oh, okay. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Like I don't love corporations and companies. They're bullshit in the ways in which they ruin people's lives left, right, and center. So maybe it's okay that they're getting a little bit of a poke in the eye every now and then from the audience. I don't know.
So this is weird because this kind of coalesces with something I experienced this week, and it was a continually quote retweeted request for moments from the early years of Family Guy that you like think are still think are hilarious. So I saw a lot of early Family Guy in my Twitter feed this week, and it made me wonder, after just being inundated by it, if the return of Family Guy to the air was sort of the shot heard around the world and exactly what you're discussing right now. Because that show is still going strong, and it is the cornerstone of their marketing for like animation on Fox. And I can't remember.
It's an interesting place to start, but I think the thing that we should point out and remember, and it doesn't matter because history remembers in the way that it wants to remember, whatever the facts may be. But it's important to point out that there were like write-in campaigns, mail-in campaigns, all of that shit for years that didn't do fuck all for Fox. It wasn't until they saw DVD sales numbers. It wasn't until there was a hardline cash amount that they could point at and go, this is the amount of money we're leaving on the table by not bringing it back. That's finally what incentivized them to bring that show back. So you're totally right. It was from an outside viewpoint, people demanded that show come back. The show came back, and there were a lot of people that celebrated and acted as if they were the ones that like as if we had something to do with it. And we did in a way, but really our money did. And that's the more important bit that nobody seems to remember from that. Whereas like with the Mass Effect stuff, it's interesting because the game was kind of already in people's hands. Like the money had already been given to them. And so it's a much deeper like cut in that way for me, is that idea of being like, they didn't have to do that. Fox kind of had to bring them back. Once they saw the money there, they'd be stupid not to, right? Whereas like in Mass Effect, that same argument doesn't hold true, right? But I don't think you're wrong in the ways that people perceive what happened with Family Guy as definitely being a big win for fans in that regard.
Right. And because it is, you're not wrong. It was totally the DVD sales. Because, God, it's just burned in my mind. And where I came back from, since knowing that the DVD sales were ultimately what led to Family Guy, DVD releases of television shows, as far as I can tell, was a huge shifting point in media and how media is consumed. Because I was thinking about the 90s. How many reboots did we get in the 90s of television shows?
Sure. There was a lot of stuff that was like, we're going to attempt this thing, and then it became a completely different thing. That sort of stuff happened a lot.
You have a lot of like the reunion specials.
The reunion, or the later years, the college years, right? Like that sort of stuff, right? Yeah.
So like, but that's the thing, and those were generally the same like characters, but it was not like we got Happy
you could even
Days
get into the soap operas, right? The primetime soap operas, where what they would do is they would backdoor pilot in other primetime soap operas by introducing a character and then having that character move away, and now they live in 90210. So let's go see what they're doing over there.
Yeah,
a lot of that sort of
like
shit.
That, like that's how it was done in the 90s, and then it's after Family Guy comes back for the 4th season, and then continues to be this dominant structure. I mean, honestly, when's the last time you watched an episode of Family Guy, though?
A new episode
of Family Guy, yeah.
I couldn't tell you. It's been years.
Yeah. I think I watched one last year, and it was because it was just all over social media, so I'm like, I just want to watch it so I can be done with this. So I don't...
Yeah, on TV with commercials, I can tell you the last one I watched was the 420 weed episode, which I think is like season 4 or 5, right?
I think it's season 5, yeah.
Everybody needs a bag of weed.
Yeah. Everything is better with a bag of weed.
Yeah. That's the last one that I watched on Fox. Since then, it had been Hulu, really, to be, to point fingers, and then even that has dropped off. I mean, I don't even own Hulu anymore, so I don't even know. I guess, is Family Guy anywhere else?
Family Guy is still on Hulu. I don't know if it's anywhere else at this point.
Yeah.
Why would it be?
So I mean, I don't even have access to it, really.
Yeah.
Which is even crazier now that I think about that. Like, I don't even have access to Family Guy at this moment, which is a wild prospect.
I mean, what about DVD seasons? Do you have any DVD seasons?
Not
Could
anymore.
you? Oh, you have all gone.
I've moved so much over the years that I mean, and I will point to that because if I could, I would love to still have those DVDs of those first
Oh
seasons.
yeah.
Like I will say that. I just have just pared down my DVDs over 5 various moves over the last 10 years. You know?
No, and that makes sense. I just when you say
Yeah.
you don't have access to it, I want to make sure, like, you don't have access to it in like some big online database. But do you have anything, or has it just been completely purged from your life?
I mean, I guess I probably still, from my danger years, I probably still have some bootleg, like,
Oh yeah,
rips of it
of
buried
course.
in some hard drive that I probably can't even, probably doesn't even start anymore. I've got tons of hard drives left over from all the years, and I've got a couple that I've realized, whatever systems inside them are just fucking dead, and so I'm trying to figure out if there's any way to like salvage the shit out of them. I am a digital hoarder though, for sure.
Oh yeah, well, I am. I think one of the ones I've kept moving forward with me is recorded from an actual TV tuner. Like I had friends who built their own DVRs and then just hooked
Hmm.
it up to the antenna, and it was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the file of the one where they aired the unedited episode where the guy's driving in his Hummer and is watching Madagascar and says those animals are so fucking funny, and he just said it right over the air. So
Yeah.
like that is one that I'm like I should have this with me. Like this is
Yeah.
history right here.
Yeah, I think like so you were saying that like the ways the DVD kind of changed the way that we consume stuff though is totally true. I mean, because if you think about what was going on in the 90s, the closest equivalent to the DVD sale was the VHS collections that were coming out, and you'd get 3 or 4 episodes a tape, maybe 10 if they were if it
I
was
mean, you
later in
get
VH.
3 to 4 seems what I was remembering. The
Yeah,
the fact
right.
that Clerks had all 6 episodes on one tape blew my mind.
Right, and the reason that you were only getting 3 to 4 was a marketing decision. We can sell more tapes if we limit the stuff we put on them and stuff like that, for sure.
But
Also
then they also
costless
sell it to us
print them.
as it's for us. Because if we
Right.
put more episodes on there, the tape would be more likely to break. It's strong tape when there's only 3 episodes.
Right, the right, the quality would drop and things like that, which they're not wrong, but like the math does not always work out to let's cut an hour of
Yeah,
friends.
exactly. Let's
No,
let's
not,
just
right.
waste a
Yeah.
bunch of tape at the end of this.
There's just so if that's the way that people were kind of holding on to this stuff, and then DVD allowed, I mean, it's the business side of things, right? Like I just said, it was cheaper for them to put this view, and they could get more money by selling more. But with DVDs, they had a kind of a two-hit combo of the space was there for them to be able to do it, quality could be assured, and by putting more on the disc, they could charge more for those collections. So they realized that they really would benefit from doing that, and then that's how we find ourselves with the Family Guy stuff, where they put this stuff out. Family Guy hits big and it comes back, and like and so again, it's a move to give the perception of more power to the audience, and they businesses, companies, creators kept giving more and more and more perception of power to the consumer, that when we started to become smarter consumers, because this really is only something that's really kicked off in the last 20 years or so, because I think we just woke up from the drug-addled 80s and the on the top 90s that we were kind of loving all of our shit, and our shit didn't stink specifically, and then
Hmm.
suddenly we all kind of realized it did, right? We all started to kind of question everything, which again, big fan of, like a huge believer that you should be a smart consumer. You should look into research where your shit's coming from to figure out if it's exactly what you want it to be. Like, I'm all for that, but it did mean that they had to start getting weirder and grosser, and in some places they had to give up a little bit of shit in order to kind of keep consumers on board, and it really kind of kicked off this entire sense of entitlement in people, because they were doing the research, because they were doing the footwork. They feel like they've earned something, and if they get to the end of the rainbow of doing all of this work and it's not what they thought it was, there's disappointment to be had there. And I get that, but we need to learn that we need to do our research into this shit, decide what we want to do, and then we need to learn to live with our decision. Like there's a certain aspect, there's a certain point, at which we are given kind of the reins to decide whether or not we want to keep pursuing shit because we've discovered some upsetting information and upsetting or adverse information, right? We as smart consumers are then tasked with deciding if we want to give ourselves, if we want to give ourselves over to it anymore. And a lot of people in that moment pick the third option, which is apparently, I want this thing, but I want this thing to be the thing I always wanted it to be. And it's just like, it doesn't work that way. Your two options are, I want this thing, and I looked into it and realized I don't want this thing, so I'm walking away. Or I want this thing, looked into it, and decided I could deal with the shit. Let's do it. I want this thing. There isn't a third option. You don't get to turn around and say, I want this thing and I want it to be this other thing. It's like, no, that it's not this thing anymore, guys. It's like, it's a weird place to be in as a consumer, because like you have a modicum of power, but it's not enough to change the world. It's just enough to change your world.
Wow. That was profound.
It
hit for me. I'm sorry. I know I sound like I'm being a jerk, but like that hit.
It's
like
this
that.
Crazy thing though about like being in these communities, like that for the last, I've only been looking into this stuff for a while, for the last couple of weeks. Like you are probably more in with like modders and stuff like that because of things like speedruns and stuff. But there is this element to video games and the home computer and all of this shit where I have so many tools at home. Why am I not allowed to build my own table, right? Like I should be able to, or the table I got doesn't quite do what I need it to do. Let me cut the legs down a little bit. Let me add a little length to it. Let me do what I need to. I bought the damn thing. I should have the ability to do that. Like I totally am for that side of it. It's going to the table manufacturer and demanding that every table they sell being a different way is like, what you can't do that. Right. So like, where is that line for me? That's the next question, right? Is how much am I willing to put up with from the community of, I didn't like this thing, so I changed it, versus I didn't like this thing, so I demanded they change it. It's like,
well, I think at least on this one, we're at the next stage of the evolution, because I think enough of the, zygotes involved in this particular experience, they were given with, go yell at the people who made it to make it the way I want it, or make it the way I want it myself.
Right.
And
I mean, it's a perfect storm because like Twitter was like really in its infancy,
new, and
Facebook and all of that sort of shit. So social media and the ability to actually directly yell at a company about a thing you didn't like was like fresh in our minds and all that sort of shit, for sure.
And game journalism at the time, I guess, like there's like maybe 3-4 main game journalism outlets now. Like at the time, they were everywhere. So if one of them picked up a story, it could be echoed and parroted to a cacophony within 2 hours of being published.
Right.
So, and that gave a lot of weight to what we were hearing at the time. So I think that lack of games journalism, games media, where they're telling us what to think, and that could just be one guy's opinion, but then suddenly all of these publishers are championing it, and there are people who swear by those publishers. Like that's just going away, which is good. And also, enough things continued evolving to realize, if I want my game changed, if this is what I want out of the game, I have to be the one to make that change. Otherwise, we wouldn't see mods to the level that we see them now. If everybody had stopped working just because of the switch to the ending of Mass Effect 3 that was demanded, we wouldn't see all of the work that we see. And you're right. Like, I don't even think of the patches that I see done to Super Nintendo games as modding, but it's what they are. It's the same word. It's the same that. They just call it ROM hacking, but it's still just modifications, just to older games. And, somebody saying, and as much as it was for the randomizer of the game when it became hyper popular, like, they used to run on the Japanese game. And if you played the game in English, you don't need to read it anymore, right? Once you know how to do everything. So like playing on the Japanese version, which was just faster by design, like it didn't matter that you couldn't do it. But then once people were playing the game for the first time via the randomizer, that's when they did a full translation patch to that Japanese version of the game.
Right.
And that's what it comes from. And that brings more people into the game. Because I remember when I started speedrunning Link to the Past, the first question I would get from everybody was, how do you read the Japanese? And I think that was more they'd like to know my secret, right? I can read Japanese and Link to the Past, and so can you. Ask me how. No, it's not that. It's the fact that this game, I know every inch of. So it doesn't matter what they're telling me.
Don't know the story. Don't read the story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I read the story.
I
read the story the first time. You say that though, but I bought and beat a new game yesterday called Vengeful Guardian Moonrider. And
that sounds like a very badass game from an alternate universe.
Oh my, it's fantastic. And it's by the same guys who published Infernax, the arcade crew. So I'm like, yes, I'm going to give this one a shot once I get the opportunity. And I just had nothing going on yesterday. I'm like, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to beat it. That's today's plan. I also did my taxes. I did like one thing for you and then one thing for me. And then the rest of the time I think I watched 5 movies yesterday. Like if I'm just talking about perfect Saturdays.
I don't know if taxes would be included in my perfect Saturday, but fair enough.
Well, you know what? I like to get the taxes done as early as I can. The Saturday after I receive my W-2, I'm getting it all done. And at the end of it, if you have a refund, let's also talk about that. I'm getting a refund. So it's very exciting to be like, ooh, I'm getting money from the government. That almost never happens.
Now, Devon, I would point out that if you are getting a refund, it just means that you simply aren't doing your taxes correctly the rest of the year.
That is true. I am giving a interest-free loan to the government. Thanks, Melvin. You know what? They always give it back to me, though. The first year, they don't give it back to me when I overpay them.
I know exactly what I'm doing when I overpay on my taxes so that I can get that refund and have one goddamn day in my life where I feel kind of okay about our government.
There you go. Right? It's nice. It's like, man, I just got a victory. And the best part is those 11 months where I wasn't getting victory, I wasn't going to jail because of something that I was like doing incorrectly regarding my money.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty good. It's kind of like pass and go in Monopoly if you really want to analogize it.
Man, I have a friend that's doing. It's really popular out here for young folks to jump on the tax preparation internship when just to fill out the bank account for 6 months.
You will go to the city, you will learn their ways, and you will bring them back and do the taxes for the family.
And so from that, there's just a lot of people around me that are kind of in that phase right now, like they're moving into those jobs. Mm-hmm. And apparently one of the big ones out here, I don't know which one they all work for, really fucked a bunch of them over because part of signing up for this process is that you pay. I don't agree with this part, but you pay for a tax preparation learning course so that you can kind of learn the basics. And then you go through that class for about 6 weeks, and then it puts you in prime position for these internships. So a lot of people do that because there's a lot of people going for them. People want to get a leg up. And I guess whatever lesson class one of them used was set for like individual tax returns, but the company itself, 90% of it is business related, not personal. So a bunch of people are now rolling into these positions and paid all this money to take this class and then found out that the class didn't teach them anything to be ready for this main thing. I don't know. Just was having coffee with somebody yesterday talking about it, and I was just like, that sounds miserable. I'm so sorry.
That sounds like somehow they own the single prep tax courses.
Well, yeah, I think Intuit was mentioned more than once, so I think that's part of the whole problem is that that I guess Intuit runs these classes for everybody, no matter what company you're going to go work for, and so people took it through Intuit, and Intuit didn't gear any of that towards business tax, which I mean in this country is the main source of tax, but it's fine. I'm not involved in it, so I can't speak too much more on it, but that's the way the taxes go in this country for anybody not in America that's curious. They teach you how to do them, and then you find out you learned it wrong.
Also, they only teach you how to do them. A thing that you're required to do as a member of the country if you seek it out. It's not like there's a tax prep course in high school.
If you give a person money to tell you how to explain to you how to do this basic function of our government because they don't tell you otherwise.
Like, honestly, everybody's like, I wish they taught me something good in high school, like how to balance a checkbook or pay my taxes. And then like that sticks in my head, and I'm like, we take like social studies. That's part of society. It would make sense if we were taught this, by our government funded schools, how to fund our government.
I spent 3 weeks in a social studies class in ninth grade, I think, learning all about Elvis going to talk to Nixon about how he didn't like the way Nixon was running the country. That's what I learned in social studies.
That sounds like a specialized course you would take in college. Like, that does not sound like a general learning subject for ninth grade.
Not when you spend 3 freaking weeks on.
I mean, I would watch the movie, that movie, Elvis Meets Nixon movie, with Michael
if that
Shannon.
Had been out when I was in high school, I would have done aces in that part of that course.
Elvis looked a lot like Zod from Man of Steel. That's my observation. Sorry, I don't know what
High school Devon voice. High school Devon voice is new, but I enjoy
that
it.
Specifically freshman Devon voice. Once I was on the radio, my voice evolved. And
it's like a little bit of Valley Girl mixed with a little bit of like dumbass.
Yeah, it's kind of like the buffoon and the Valley Girl had a baby, and that's ninth grade Devon. I'm not gonna do a buffoon quote. All I want to do is, but yeah, like that's insane. That movie is like 90 minutes long, and you get a lot out of it. I don't know what you're doing for 3 weeks on it.
Not learning how to pay my taxes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the end of it, right? Or even if it's in a math class, there should be like a citizenship class that covers.
Some people out there are going to say, "Oh, I had that class. We had like a home economics class where we learned about the economics of the home." And it's great that you had that. In my class, home economics was the class that they put you in when they didn't know where to put you anywhere else. I had band. Like I had other stuff. I had Spanish that I was taking. I took 3 years of Spanish, and you only really needed one at EP. But like that's what I was like when I wasn't given the opportunity to take those classes. So maybe there is ways, but again, smart consumer, like I should have really probably looked into, but nobody ever explains this shit to you.
No.
But if you're a high schooler now, like, and you get to quote unquote pick your classes, I like there's quotes around that because obviously you don't get to the same free range you do in say like college or whatever. But like you know there was a level of that when I was in high school. Do the research to figure out what it is that you're actually picking, because like the majority of the time in those situations, a guidance counselor just says to a kid, this is what you should do. I talk to you twice a year, so I know everything about you and your future, son. Here, you're gonna go in band class. Thanks. I didn't question that, but I should have, because as I sit now, band was fun, but like fuck me. If I had taken just 2 weeks of a course that taught me how to like, hey, here's how you organize a file cabinet for all of your receipts for the year so that when you comes time to file your taxes, you know where the shit is. Like, if somebody had ever told me that in high school, I'd be in much better position now. Hey, don't sign up for a credit card just because they're going to give you free shit, kid. Like, thanks.
I mean, unless it's the Devon Decker approved Amazon credit card that everybody got in college because of me, that was crazy.
It was Jeff Bezos and you working together for
Jeff
the first
Bezos
time.
and I. That's how we built the Amazon together, and it cut me out like Wozniak. No, not
sitting in a garage together in Silicon Valley.
He had hair then. I think that's the other reason why he's mad, is there was a chemical fire, and I blew to put it out, and it made him bald forever.
And then weirdly transferred all of the hair to you, and you are now
I'm double hairy.
Werewolf.
You have to ooh for a long time to represent all of the zeros in his net worth.
Oh man,
I don't know what we were even talking about. That got us there. Oh yeah, the credit card thing. Yeah, it's strange, especially like our school wanted to look like it was from the future while still being staunchly in the past. So we had the whole tell me if this is how your schedule was in high school. We would have 80-minute periods, and we would meet 4 of them one day, and then the remaining 3 the next day.
Ooh, weird. So we had alternating time days. So Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays were 50-minute long classes. which I forget what that worked out to. I think that worked out to 4 classes a day with like lunches and a break included, I think. And when I say break, that was where things would like home economics or band or things like that would go. Because we weren't really graded in those classes so much as we were just kind of just given like a hey, you showed up grade in those classes.
Yeah, pass fail.
Yeah. And then the other days they would be not 80 minutes. Well, maybe they would be about an hour and 10, I think, hour and 10 minutes as opposed to 50. So there'd be 20 extra minutes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And those classes were generally still classes, but they'd be the more specific ones. So like by the time I was a senior, that's the year that the 80-minute class that you're talking about probably would have been something like physics for me. Right, like it would have been something kind of high end, kind of specialized. Like not everybody needs to take this, but like this is where you are in your time. Like you did biology, you did chemistry. The next step is to take the physics course. So that was kind of what would be fit in on those longer period days. So we had alternating days. Like Tuesdays and Thursdays were long class days. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays were short class days.
Yeah, we had long class days, and then one of the classes would be like 40 minutes. And it was weird how it slotted together. I wasn't a big fan of it. But also, in addition to that, like, weird, this will prepare you better for college, which then I listened to your schedule, and that actually sounds like it would prepare someone for college. Not learning how to sit in one place for almost an hour and a half.
Oh, no. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely long form classes in college, but that's like once a semester. You like one class out of your semester might be like a Wednesday night 3-hour class. And that's more geared towards like the arts where you're like, I need 3 hours because we're going to show this movie and then talk about it. Or we're going to do the scene work. Or I guess labs, right? Like there'd be some stuff, but it's never more than that's just like the one-off once a year type thing. Like you get this 3-hour class for 8 weeks, you know?
Yeah, understanding that courses on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays are going to be 50 minutes long, and ones that meet only Tuesday and Thursday to make up for that extra missed time is going to be that longer thing, so that you're spending the same amount of time in those subjects. Like that prepares you for how a college schedule works.
Yes, yeah.
The fact that like every day is going to be like the worst day of college ever. Yeah, because it was 80, and then it was 2 hours that we were in whatever our third period course was, and in either at the beginning, the middle, or the end of that 2-hour block, you would have lunch, which sometimes you'd have a divided class like that, which I never liked.
Yeah.
Like it was like
one of the things that like in this like vein, like along with the informed consumer stuff that I never considered because I don't have kids and like have never really thought about what it would be like if I did. But like the idea of like school shopping, like for high school and junior highs and elementary school for kids, right? Like moving into certain neighborhoods or things like that, looking into how the schools operate. There's not enough transparency in this regard, like things like scheduling and what their aims are. Like as a 35-year-old man, I cannot walk down the street and walk into the high school nearby and be like, "How do you run your class schedules?" like there's not a way for me to do that, right? So I don't know how you would go about it, but like informing yourself about this, because like the true like idea of the informed consumer has to have come when they started fucking around with baby shit, right? Like the once baby formulas and baby like carriages and all that sort of stuff, like the ways in which as a parent you need to learn to stay on top of your research with that shit, because a product you bought yesterday, they could find out tomorrow is like killing kids everywhere, so you need to return that shit immediately. And that is a constant thing in baby buying. Like I don't know the best way to put it. Like the baby I was gonna say baby market, and that didn't feel right.
No,
like
baby market sounds wrong.
But yeah, becoming that informed consumer when you have the dependency of a living, breathing human being that you're taking care of, like becomes a very high priority for you, right? And so like from that, like born from that idea being that, hey, we're doing this in order to protect kids, we should also do this to protect ourselves, right?
Yeah, I mean that's also a thing that's happened in our lifetimes. Like when we were kids, there was no care about the baby. Like
there was a lot of like recalls and things like that.
But
right?
I feel like that happened when we were older. Like I think that happened in like the 90s. So I remember Dale, very different stuff. Like when Mom put her car seat in the car and it was facing backwards, like she's going to be riding backwards, and I'm like, what is that about? Like, that's not how baby seats go. It's like, actually now because of new safety regulations, that's how they do it. And like, this is a chair that will do that. And I'm just like, this is all news to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like crazy. And if you've never had a child in your life, like, and that's just a younger sibling for me, but like you have a perception of what baby stuff is like, and then you start to buy that stuff, and it's a completely different ball game.
Well, I mean, the market that is out there for just baby support books,
Yeah.
right? And the ways in which that information is constantly being argued and changed and updated. Put the baby on his belly, put the baby on his back, put the baby on his butt, put the baby on its head.
Hang the
Like,
baby from
just
a
all-
hook. Teach it not to fear gravity. Soon we'll have flying humans.
Yeah, if we just train them all to understand that gravity is a choice.
Gravity is a choice, child.
Gravity is simply just a theory.
Oh my
Break it. There's yeah, I mean, like the ways in which like caring for an infant child really kind of gives you that really good glimpse into like you're on your toes. You're constantly looking into like what is the right way to go about this, because if I get it wrong, there are dire consequences. And we don't really apply that logic to stuff that we do for ourselves. And part of that is because we know ourselves better than we know, what another being is dealing with. So like we know what our limits are in a ways that you can't just assume those with a baby, right? So there's some of that, but like there's this idea that you learn to look into this shit. We have learned to look into this shit and to take a good hard look and consider stuff. And the stuff we consider is different. I don't think in the 90s anybody would care about the politics of Johnson & Johnson while they were out there picking up their baby powder. Now, there's a lot of people that don't love some of the shit that they do, so they try and use different companies. Procter and Gamble, which I think owns Johnson & Johnson, don't they? Or are they rivals? But there's this idea of being that like we try and be we try and be ethical, we try and be informed as consumers. And this is something that is true in all markets. It just, like I said earlier, like it just starts to get really weird for me when you start looking at the ways people are applying this same logic to art, because there's a level of authorship in art that needs to be respected that doesn't necessarily when you're out buying frozen peas.
So do you think that idea of authorship, where you need to respect the artist, like that goes away somewhere along the time?
I will say really quickly to clarify your question, because I think that those do not go hand in hand. It's not a given that you need to respect the author just because authorship is present. Authorship is just more present with an artistic endeavor than it is with some other stuff.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, like with the authorship, do you think we start to give that less credence at a time where George Lucas, who is the author, decides to change Star Wars in a way that a lot of people feel is for the worse? Where, like, even these people who are responsible for this thing I love, as authors, are not infallible. So, like, do I get to step in now? Like, where does that disconnect form?
See, I don't know, like the grumpy old man in me wants to be like, make your own damn movie. If you don't like the way Lucas is making them, then make your own. It's like, but obviously that's not how that works for everybody, right? Like so it's not a yes or no answer. It's not, It's not a right. So like, do I think people have the right to buy a copy of Star Wars, the original trilogy, and cut out on their own all of the silly shit that George Lucas re-added in the late 90s?
Yeah.
Right. And I say re-added because this was stuff that, like, as much as we can say making changes that for the worse, he did at least give the air that these were the things he always wanted to do but couldn't at the time. The changes that he made to the 90s versions of the original trilogy were changes he said he had always intended.
It will bring it more in line with my original vision for the trilogy.
Right. So like that attitude, right? But if somebody wants to buy those and then take them home and then clean them up for themselves, you do what makes you happy. You want to sit around over a computer, like ripping all of this shit and going through and personally editing out like stuff you don't like. Sure, man, you do you. The second that you turn around and say like you know, get on Twitter and say like George Lucas needs to be stopped. Should like no, calm down. George Lucas is allowed to do what George Lucas wants to fucking do, right? And then you have the choice as a consumer as whether or not to engage with it.
Yeah.
I'm always going to that's always going to be my baseline. But again, it does become this like, you know, situation where Kanye West, like, I can say, hey, you don't love the shit he says about Jews, then you don't have to consume his music. No, I think there's a level at which now the community should step in and say, hey, like, we need to actively remind people that like this person is in this situation right now mentally and perhaps needs help in ways that they are not receiving it. And also like, let's not give them too much spotlight right now. Let's let them take a break. Like, I think that there is definitely a point at which a line gets crossed in which the audience should make the artist aware of their issues. Again, I don't know if that means that you get to tell Kanye West to not make his music. I think you get to say to Kanye West, fuck off. I don't agree with you. Don't want to ever engage with your shit again, and you're never going to see a dime from me. And I'm saying, and I have the right to say that to you. I don't know if somebody then gets to say, make new music or something like I don't think you get to turn around and be like, make art that apologizes for this now. Like, first of all, if his intention is not to apologize, then that shit ain't gonna come through in his work.
Yeah, if his intention is just to give you the apology you're asking for,
and I think that's what it is, right?
That?
It's like making the artist do something that is not coming from a place of art. What are you doing, right? Like going to the writers of Mass Effect and saying change your shit. They're now out there doing something that like their heart's not in. You know, like, I don't know, maybe I should look into some more about what the creators were saying at the time that all of this shit was going on, because it's one of the few places where I'm a little fuzzy. I never really got the impression that the creators of Mass Effect at EA at the time, you know, because by that point BioWare was completely consumed by EA when Mass Effect 3 came out. Like, I don't know if the people working at the time were like being forced to do things by upper management, which is something we do often hear from EA. Like, I'd always kind of gotten the impression that they wanted to clarify what they meant with the new ending they put out, not change the ending, although it does apparently change some stuff, you know, but clarify what they intended. Like, I had never really heard that they were going against their intentions, but if they were, that's fucking gross. Like, that's doubly no fun, and it kind of gives a lot of credence to those people out there that are like, look, I don't even like this ending, but this is the way that they intended it, right? It kind of lends some weight to that. I don't know, but the second that you're forcing an artist to make art that they don't want to be making, you're breaking the system to the point where it's pointless for me.
I get that. I mean, it's so much of art, though. So much of art, because of the consumerism aspects that have been attached to it, are that. Like, we're making a sequel to this movie, and either you can be on board, or we're going to make it, because we own the legal, like, property that is this movie.
Star Wars is such an interesting kind of way to look at this conversation, because, like, we're currently in this really interesting times, and really for Star Wars, but like this idea being that there are the movies that people are vocal people. I don't know if they're the majority or minority, but vocal people have made it very clear that they don't enjoy the last three films, and then every project that Disney puts out is a complete wild swing depending on who you're talking to about whether or not they're going to enjoy it. The Mandalorian and Boba Fett and fucking Bad Batch and what's the other one?
Andor,
but yeah,
Obi-Wan.
Andor, that's the one. Thank you. Andor is the one specifically I was thinking of, because Andor, you know, everybody loved, but it had this weird thing where it had come after a lot of stuff that people didn't. So there was this real like conversation in the community of like, this is the good one. You really need to give this a chance, because if we don't watch this one, they're not going to keep making the good stuff. They're going to keep going back to the bad stuff, and like those kinds of conversations, totally cool, right? Like, but I'm curious when we finally see somebody. I'm not saying they're going to have any credit to what they're saying or owed that we even listen to them, but eventually I feel like we are going to hear somebody out there demand that 7, 8, and 9 just get redone. Like, just get ignored, and that George Lucas come back and tell his story or whatever nonsense comes out, right? Like, I am actually kind of amazed we have not heard that already.
I mean, the rumor floated for a little bit there at the beginning of 2020 that they were going to redo 7, 8, and 9, but it did not catch fire at all. Because, I mean, be it everything that happened in the world at the time, or the fact that that's absurd. Like, I can just choose not to watch those movies. I mean, I don't understand that either. Like, I was a big fan
the entire history of Star Wars. Every Star Wars movie that has come out since Empire Strikes Back has dealt with this same cycle of fans actively despising the thing that's there and talking about how it betrayed whatever original work had already been done. You know, like since the fucking Ewoks in Return of the Jedi, people have been having this conversation about how they feel like Star Wars has really gone down the tubes. But then you always hear now of people being like, oh, but I adore that one. And it's just like, okay, so you've come around on it. That's great. I mean, like, and so that's the big thing, is that we're making all of these demands for all of these changes, and tastes change. What's going to happen in 10 years as I sit here playing Mass Effect 10, 15 years out from when that series, you know, came to fruition and culminated in this ending that upset all these people? There is now an avid, you know, amount of the community that's like, no, restore the intended original ending. And it's just like, man, where the hell were you guys 10 years ago?
I mean, they were out there, but that wasn't, like, they would be a line in the Kotaku article about it. While some fans are fine with the original, the majority of fans, and then here's 3 examples from Twitter. Yeah. What do you think? Please write down in the comments what you think BioWare should do about the ending to Mass Effect 3. Because they're searching for engagement.
Fuck all in terms of comments nowadays, but I get what you're saying. 10 years ago, yeah.
Like that's how the article would end. The article would literally be, this is being discussed. While there's a small contingent of fans who are okay with the ending, the majority of the community are saying this. 3 examples from Twitter. Either way, we don't think we've heard the end from the Mass Effect 3 series. Please comment below. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Maybe you disagree. Comment below. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. And again, it's about engagement. It's about informing consumers. It's about all of that good stuff. I think the intentions behind this entire endeavor are
they're definitely in the right place.
It's just that people don't know how to handle that kind of responsibility and power. For a group of people demanding more responsibility and power over their own shit, once they're given even an inkling of it, they sure don't prove themselves to be worthy of it.
I mean, once you're given an inch of rope, you hang yourself. Is an expression?
And I don't mean to make it sound like these people don't have a right to like their opinion or anything like that. No. And I don't even know if I feel like they don't have a right to demand changes. Maybe they do. It's just, it's not as easy as just simply saying we should be able to do this, we shouldn't be able to do that, because too many people take that we should be able to and turn it into just sickening shit nowadays.
I agree. Speaking of sickening shit nowadays, can we talk about Netflix and how they just kind of shit their pants this week?
Sure. I mean,
like, are you ready to have that discussion? Yeah. What?
They weren't the only ones, but yeah. I mean, no,
HBO, I'll talk about anybody.
Their shit and
what did HBO
Warner
do?
Brothers and
Warner Brothers is HBO.
HBO just announced more of their DC stuff getting removed. Like, I mean, like, I don't know if I'm gonna have much of a reason after I finish Harley Quinn to keep my HBO subscription. Like, I was watching a lot of Batman the Brave and the Bold, and now that's not going to be there, that kind of stuff, right? Like, they're just more and more stuff is leaving HBO Max on a regular basis. And what they're doing is they're taking some of that stuff that they held up as the reason to get HBO Max, like Cartoon Network stuff and Warner Brothers animation stuff and all of that, and they're slowly putting it into the model that they have for their regular HBO stuff, which is, we've licensed this for 3 months. After that, we may not relicense it, which is the same situation that Netflix has been in, and Hulu and all of that shit, that HBO kind of gave the air that because they were owned by WB, they were going to be above that kind of stuff. That idea of consistency was kind of a promise that HBO made over some of the other bigwigs. I will also give this credit though to something like Peacock, right? Like where their whole thing is we're tied to Universal, right? So they are giving an air of consistency. This stuff will always be here because we own this. We don't need to worry about licensing deals because we own the licenses, which we're now learning is also bullshit because so many different companies are involved in making a TV show that 20th Century Fox could very well own the rights to your favorite ABC show because they're technically the ones that made it, right? Like, but ABC puts a streaming app out, and you're just so excited because you think your show's gonna be there, only to find out, oh, it's only around for 3 weeks, and it's only like half of the episodes because Fox didn't want to license the rest of it. It's the same bullshit every other streaming service is dealing with. But again, that promise was made to consumers that if you come this way with us, you're gonna have this thing in perpetuity. And it's just not happening. So that was the big thing. That kind of kicked this ball rolling, right? Is that stuff with HBO kind of dropping the ball on more DC shit leaving soon.
I mean, I wonder if that was all preamble to James Gunn's announcement on, was that Wednesday?
Well, and then James Gunn comes out and has this whole thing about what the slate is going to be, and then he backtracked it. Did you hear the backtrack?
I didn't know about this backtrack. I've heard people acknowledge this backtrack, and
so he shit all over Marvel and said we're going to make sure that our movies are ready to be made before we make them. Essentially, I think the exact kind of line was something along the lines of, we're not going to write 2/3 of a movie and let the last third get written while it's being made, which was directed very heavily at Marvel in the words that he chose, like around that sentence, And I will say, I think that the only real Marvel movie I know where that was really happening, like we know was happening, was Doctor Strange. Like Doctor Strange famously didn't have an ending as they were filming it, and they were talking about getting new pages every day. And there's an entire other Doctor Strange movie that was filmed that we will probably never see.
We mean the first Doctor Strange, right? Not Multiverse of Madness.
No, I mean Multiverse of Madness. Multiverse of Madness famously was getting rewritten as they were going into film every day. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure because there are two Doctor Strange
movies. No, the first Doctor Strange was pretty tight from my understanding.
Yes.
And you look at Avengers Endgame and Infinity War and stuff like that, and I don't feel like that's how it didn't feel to me like that's how those movies were being made. But I'm not. But the other side of this is I'm not in the industry. James Gunn knows what James Gunn knows and doesn't. So I just, as a guy that proudly displayed a finished script for Guardians of the Galaxy 3 4 years ago, right? To then take a pot shot at Marvel and say they don't let you finish a script before they make your movie seems a little disingenuous. And people have called him out on that. They've been like, yeah, there's definitely one or two projects that we could point to that both DC and Marvel have done where it's felt like this. I mean, Shazam also had a lot of that problem, apparently. The Fury of the Gods, to clarify.
Oh, no, the first one also felt that way.
But Fury of the Gods definitely has been suffering from that. We don't know what to do. This whole thing's on fire. What can we throw into this to save this movie type of shit? And it's part of the reason it keeps getting pushed back is reshoots and all of this sort of stuff, right? But to James Gunn's credit, he was trying to say something larger about all of Hollywood and saying that writing in general has kind of fallen to the wayside and has given way to the whims of fans and studios.
Yeah.
Like the ways in which fans are demanding this thing be in it, so let's split this in. That's still coming from the studio, right? Is the studio is saying fans want this, let's do it. So really, studio interference is really what he's talking about. And I love that. It's just the ways in which he chose to talk about it really started to feel kind of weird. And on top of that, he also in that was saying, just because we put a schedule of movies out, note that we didn't put specific dates on anything, and that's because we reserve the right to hold anything back that we feel is not doing what it's supposed to do. He basically said we're not going to put out half-assed movies. His promise to us is that he's not going to let DC continue to put out, unfleshed out, half-assed projects that don't go anywhere. And if anything, counter things that are happening in other movies and shit like that. He's not going to let that happen, according to him.
According to him, yeah. I mean,
but this was after they had bluntly put out a schedule of films and TV shows they were working on that to then turn around and say, well, keep in mind, any of those might be canceled or cut. That's been the situation we've always been in. We've been watching movies and TV shows from Marvel and DC get pushed back, canceled, and all sorts of shit since the beginning. So in one breath he's talking about how he's going to run this ship differently and then in the next breath he's openly admitting he's going to keep doing the same shit they've been doing all along.
Yeah, I'd say Ghostbusters answer the call for me of it all. As soon as that movie came out, it was like sequel's greenlit, everybody happy, and then when nobody saw it the second weekend, yeah, we're canceling that sequel. But nobody cared then. Everybody just heard that there was going to be a sequel.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the only one that I think of where finish the movie before it's done, I could see him feeling that way about the Thor films, and especially being on set with Taika Waititi during something like Love and Thunder, where the Guardians of the Galaxy were part of that. Like, they had discussions about how they would be introduced into that film. Because those first two Thors are telling a story that Ragnarok totally throws away. Now, most people would say for the better, but, I mean, that is one where I can see him having sort of direct contact with the person who was part of that.
But they're like a fly on your end, or is that your cat?
It's the cat! I told you that the cat was going to be meowing.
That's fine.
It's totally recorded, dude. I'm not cutting that out. That's
yeah, no.
People should know that it's the cat who wanted to go out and then was no one there when I went to put her out.
When I was in elementary school, it was like a very popular like thing to annoy like the person in front of you by like lightly rubbing your fingers together in their ear like a fly was going by. Do you know that trick? I can't do it because my hands are to be honest, my hands are too fucking greasy, so I can't do that kind of shit. But like, I had friends that like they had perfected like just the right level of pressure between their finger and their index finger and their thumb to basically like create like a buzz effect, and then they'd fly it by your ear so that it sounded like a fly going by, right? And it would annoy the crap out of me all the time, and we would do it to each other and shit like that. Like there was all sorts of weird stuff that like we would do to it to like you're a kid, you're annoying each other. Right?
You annoy each other.
That sound just set that shit off in my brain so hard. Like there was just this moment where I was just like, is there a fucking fly? Oh no, is there someone behind me? And I was like, no, I'm alone in a room. It's fine.
Nope, it's the cat. It's the cat wanting to go out. And I told you, I don't know, I think I ever said it on the show, but she wanted to go out earlier, and when I opened the door, she did not want to go out. So now it's just, you made your decision, you have to live with it, cat.
No, that cat's like, you think I'm stuck in here with you? You're stuck in here with me.
She gets tired of listening to us record. I know that for a fact. Because she's been crying softly, but then once like an hour and a half goes by, she starts to amp it up. Like she'd be a really good like wing friend or like out call on a blind date.
She really thinks that it was a really lost opportunity with Christopher Eccleston in Thor: The Dark World. She really wanted to see more of that character and really thought that maybe
she's just a big fan of Chris Eccleston all around. She's upset about his only one season of Doctor Who, especially once it's been proven how good he's playing the character in audio dramas released after the fact. Him as Destro she thought was excellent, but then to just replace him in the next movie because you don't see his face anymore, that pissed her off.
Yeah, well, it pissed a lot of us off. Man. Yeah, I don't know what James Gunn is going to do with DC. He's making a lot of big promises right now, and he's setting himself up for
failure. Is I think the easiest word to say?
I mean, like, again, this comes back to like you never want to tell an artist what they can and can't do, and like I at least I don't. And so like if this is something that he thinks he's capable of pulling off and is willing to throw his weight around like this beforehand, then we'll see. I will be very surprised if in 5 years we are looking at a flipped universe of DC really owning the good storytelling and fun characters and beloved franchises where Marvel is just kind of simmering in the background. I don't think it's going to be that way. Not that I think that Marvel's going to be doing gangbusters either. I still think they're still trying to figure their shit out. We're getting a little bit more here and there about what they're hoping to do with future plans and stuff, but even that's not a guarantee, and it's never been a guarantee because again, we've been dealing with pushbacks and cancellations in this kind of vein since the whole like Marvel blow up of we're going to plan 10 movies out, like I'm not counting my chickens before they hatch,
Yeah. I mean, I called it James Gunn dick drop moment. Like when I went to go see Black Widow and why did they give dates for all the movies, Sejohn? Marvel, that was a mistake. And like, at least he didn't give dates for these movies, but as he just kept talking about what he wanted to shove into what they're calling chapter 1 of his new DCU, I'm like, you need to stop. Like, honestly, you should have stopped with, this is how we're going to finish off the stuff that exists currently. Shazam, The Flash, Aquaman 2. And then been like, and then once we can do our own thing, this is what we're leading with. He kept introducing more and more information, and as excited as I was to hear that the Authority is going to have a property, like, that's probably never going to happen, with it just being an idea in a pitch that was delivered to the world.
Yeah, I mean, but these were all the kinds of same things that people would say about Marvel, 2009, 2010, right? Like Iron Man had come out. We've gotten a couple of other ones under our belt where we're feeling like, hey, they're going somewhere. When they first announced that they were aiming for an Avengers film, I was like, I'll eat my hat if it comes out, but I love that they're trying it, and I'm in that same vein now with Gunn and DC. Is like, I don't believe an inkling of it, but if it comes out, it'll be cool. I'm kind of in a win-win situation here as a consumer. Like I don't expect them to be making these movies, so when they don't get made, we get to have content on the show about it. But when they do get made, and I get to consume it, so either way, I'm coming out on top. So like I'm gonna sit back and watch and see what happens. But yeah, so all of that shit with WB and HBO and what their plans are for. I mean, that's the other thing is everything that Gunn said about TV stuff. That's not television, that's HBO Max. That's where that stuff's going to go, right? So like, that's the other side of that is in addition to HBO Max kind of showing that they don't give a shit about licensing and holding on to stuff like they kind of promised they did, he then tied half of his schedule to HBO Max. I mean, what happens if HBO decides to have another culling? What happens if HBO decides and we lose, like, not even everything? What if we lose one or two shows in this whole grand scheme of his, and we get the rest, and then we get all of these allusions to things in a show that we don't have any access to anymore, right? At least with the Disney Marvel stuff so far, that's not been the case. It's been the opposite. They've even gone out of their way to pull in shit from Netflix, right? Like as much as I don't love what Disney Plus has been doing in terms of like pricing models and shit lately and all that sort of stuff, I can't at least complain about that. The content is still there that I was always promised was going to be there.
The reason why I'm at Disney Plus has not left yet, and I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to feel once they start peeling things away.
And I'm sure that there is stuff that has left that we haven't even clocked because it's just not in our wheelhouse. Maybe not, though. I don't know. I couldn't tell you that with Disney. It's not the story with Disney. The current story with HBO Max is not a good one. And the fact that half of that schedule that he announced was tied to HBO Max did not give me great feelings, right? And then Netflix came in the door and was just like, hold my beer.
What Netflix did, and nobody seems to be having the question that I have about it, and that's what I'd like to try to answer with this last bit of show today. And that is, so, I mean, it's gone. The original thing that they posted on Tuesday in their FAQ section is gone, which was, it can only be in one location, and if you're going to travel outside of the location, let us know, and we'll give you a access code to be able to access it for 7 days away from your home base location.
So to be clear, this was a policy that was already in place when
okay.
I was at Netflix. This was something that we dealt with. So it was being used more outside of the United States. The reason that it even became a big thing was in Europe, licensing is a bigger nightmare than it even is here. For two reasons. First of all, every country over there, what we call states in the United States is basically what they do with countries in Europe, right? Meaning there's different laws for every individual area. So different Netflixes everywhere. And so you have a lot of people in Europe where, they live in England, but they work in France. So they commute every day. And so they use Netflix to go back and forth. And suddenly they were being told, like, hey, your Netflix is in a different country. you don't have access to this stuff. And so the code in order to watch your Netflix and have access to your stuff, like that sort of thing, that's always kind of been in the water and existed. Then while I was there, and so this was what, 3 years ago at this point, while I was there, they introduced the idea to America in like a small number of households, with the idea being that they were not going to allow sharing. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but like it was the idea that like if your kid's in college, they're no longer going to have access to mom and dad's account from home. That was the narrative that we were combating. As somebody that worked for Netflix, it was my responsibility to combat that narrative, because there was this ability to get this code if you really needed it. And on top of that, they weren't going to hugely enforce it. That's the other side of all of this, is that all of this is, it's like when they make shit laws in the real world about like you can't have, you know, a fucking open drink container, and I don't mean alcohol. You just can't have an open like soda next to you as you're driving. It needs to have a cover, right? And you're like, that's stupid. How are they ever going to find anybody that does that? They're not. But what's going to happen is if they pull somebody over and then they find out they don't have any real good reason to like be hassling them, and then they find a cup, like like an empty cup in the back seat, they can then use that as a reason to give people more shit. And that's really all that this rule was when I was working there. Was it wasn't so much like we're actively out there looking for people that are breaking this rule, but because this rule's in place, because this is technically part of our terms of service, like if we catch you doing this, if we catch you as well as, you know, doing a bunch of other shit, this is a clear breakage of terms of service. So if there's an unclear thing that we catch you on, we can at least point to this and say, well, we did get them on that, right? And so it's really just I don't know what the proper like colloquial term is for it, but it's a made up rule so that they can have something on somebody basically at any time. They know tons of people are going to be breaking that rule, so it kind of gives them the ammunition whenever they need to go after somebody. Now, what happened this week was like they, in their FAQ and the ways in which they basically pushed it forward as if it was going to become like an enforced rule, and then pretty immediately pulled it back, because as you pointed out, it's no longer up there.
I mean, it was so no longer up there.
Pulled the curtain back. They pulled the curtain back for like a second, and then the second everybody saw what they were doing, they were like, just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. But I bet you that is still technically in their terms of service that you agree to when you sign up for Netflix and then never see again. You're told that it updated and they say, hey, do you want to read your updated terms of service? And you go, no, I want to get to watching my fucking shows. Get out of my way. So you don't read the updated terms of service. So I bet you that it is still in those.
Yeah, I guess for me, what bothered me about it, and where nobody was talking about it, but by all accounts, it seems like I would be screwed as somebody who has Netflix at home, but then watches it on a computer in my office on like breaks and things. Like, I'm paying for that account, and from what I understood when I signed up for it, I can access my account that I pay money for, and I should be able to access it anywhere.
But it's not how licensing works. Because think about this: this is something we ran into when I was teaching all the time. If you show that to a group of people, like if you invited, you know, even if you invited one person over to the house to watch a movie with you on Netflix, and that person was not a Netflix subscriber, even if they are a Netflix subscriber, you're technically breaking Netflix's terms of service by allowing somebody else to view your Netflix that you're paying for.
Wow.
Like, that is a break of terms of service. And that sounds ridiculous when I say it that way, but as somebody that was teaching a class of 30 students that were film students and theater students, and then we were like, hey, like, you know, we're getting to that point in the semester where we need some downtime, so let's put a movie on. Inevitably happens for every teacher. Or I legitimately am like, Shrek the Musical is up on Netflix. Let's watch this musical and talk about theater. Like, I couldn't do that. We could not do that with Netflix. We were frequently like hand slapped for new kids that would come in to teach, new TAs that would come in to teach. Just put something on Netflix, and if the department found out, they would have a talking to with us about how we can't do that. That is against the rules, because it is against Netflix's terms of service and licensing, and you can get a lot of trouble. You can get sued for a lot of money. Essentially, is what we would say. Like there's a lot of money wrapped up in this shit, right? And so to that point, you paying for that. The question is, let's assume you're in a vacuum. You know, ridiculous situation, but let's assume that you and you're not dying. You're in a vacuum, but you own Netflix. You own your Netflix. You're watching at home. You own your Netflix. You're watching it on your phone. don't tell me they didn't intend it to go places and then put out mobile versions of your shit, right? Like, fuck you. Are you going to take away phone and iPad and mobile versions of Netflix then? Because you don't get to tell somebody that they can't leave their house with their Netflix and then offer a mobile version of your product.
Yeah,
It's such bullshit.
I guess where it also strikes, because it specifically says in the Netflix that I pay for up to like 4 devices at a time.
Yes.
So like all 4 of those devices
in your house
have to be in my house. That's
within
ridiculous.
Your household. Four devices within your household are allowed to be on this at the same time. I agree. This is all ridiculous, but this is what the language
That's
states.
what the language states. And
and that's the thing, is that's what the language has always stated. That's the reason why it is not blown up, and you're wondering why Netflix is not eating shit right now, is because it's always been this way. It's just that somebody drew attention to it, and then Netflix did the Netflix thing. The second everybody was looking at it, they just made it disappear so that nobody would talk about it anymore. And lo and behold, like you said, nobody seems to be talking about it.
It was so weird to see it in the FAQ and then to go to it the next day and see it completely changed to essentially say the same thing but in less scary language. Like, it was total doublespeak on display, and it was...
It just... Those rules are still in place. The thing is, those rules have always been in place, and those rules are only there to really, like, harass people when they've run out of other options. They're more likely to get you on showing it in a public forum to other people than they ever are to care that you watched it in that forum in the first place, right? They're not going to sue you because you were watching on your computer at work. But if they find out that you've been watching on like a big screen, like, you know, when I was working at URI, we had access to that theater space that had the big screen, and we would put shit on there all the time. Remember when we would break in and play Wii and watch Netflix like on the big screen?
Yeah.
Right? And like, if they had found out about that, that would give them kind of the grounds to say, you displayed this in a venue that had potentially 350 seats. And we have no way to know how many people were in there.
Were not all
so
full.
We can only assume the worst. 350 people got to watch this movie without permission. So you owe us a lot of money. And they get to say that because in their terms of service, it says that you won't display it in this area or this area, you know, in this fashion.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, I know that. I've always known that. It's just, It has been a week for Netflix in terms of that whole thing. Each day, more information, and literally less said each time. Yeah. Which was just like, why? Like, just, we check it away. Why you keep bringing attention to it? Because the response to it inevitably was to sail the digital high seas again. Like, nobody was like, oh, Netflix has our best interest in mind. That was just an idea that they once had. It's like, even that's not what I'm hearing. Like, it's...
Yeah, no, I think Netflix has completely lost public trust in that regard. I don't think this equates to Netflix failing. I think that's the other side of this that just always kind of gets me is so many people out there want to automatically assume that when a company does not listen to its fan base, that company is screwed. And no, it doesn't work like that. There's money to be made in listening to your fans. There's no money to be lost in ignoring them. That's just not how companies work. They are set up to take care of themselves. It's why shit like companies going under, too big to fail, all that sort of shit is not happening to everybody, right? It's only happening to the people that go too far. And Netflix so far has learned we don't necessarily have to bend to the whims of everything that the online community says about us. But we should give them a bone every now and then, and they do just enough of the latter to justify the former.
Yeah, but then they have something like real life Squid Game where people are dying and passing out.
Yeah.
So
the thing about that, the thing about that sort of shit is I always get really shitty when people want to point at Netflix, big picture Netflix, for something that a production company is doing.
Right.
Like, yeah, Netflix is footing the bill for a lot of this, and so I'm sure a representative of Netflix is there, but like, to act like the people working on Big Mouth are somehow responsible for the shit that's going on the Squid Games reality show is not fair. So the people that are out there that are just like, this is my reason to not give any money to Netflix, is just like, I think the better thing to do is be the informed consumer, find out what other shit they produced, these people that did this horrible thing, and boycott that. Don't boycott the entirety of the streaming service, because I'll be honest, Netflix will probably put this up with this information about how shitty it is, I'm not gonna watch it. I don't know how many other people will. Maybe some people will watch it out of morbid curiosity. I don't know. But if not enough people watch it, they'll do like they always do with this kind of controversial shit. And again, bury it so that you never see it. I mean, think about everything that happened with Cuties a few years back, right? All of this shit that they caught. Again, they weren't the ones that made it. It was
all they did was license it out.
They licensed it out
but that's a difference. I mean, there is a difference there. Licensing out from something that was already made and funded and saying we're going to pay you to show this on our thing.
Netflix isn't a production company. There's not a Netflix production company. There are production companies that Netflix works with to make their shit.
They don't own a production company. I think that they own at least one.
They own many.
Yeah.
They own many.
Okay.
So the people working at one should not be held responsible for the bullshit at another, is what I'm getting at.
Right.
Like, if you really truly want to break this down, the people that were filming Squid Game bullshit and like people are literally fainting in fields should go to prison.
Oh, I agree. I'm not. That's not a fight.
Kind of shit that should happen there. Like to turn this into a Netflix. Like, Netflix needs to be brought down as a company because this one production company did this terrible thing. No, that production company should be, for sure.
The production company should be, but I think also Netflix has to shoulder some of it. It's where the money is introduced. If before the show is made, they go to Netflix for money and Netflix says, yes, here, take this money. That's different than if a production company creates something and then Netflix at the end says, we're going to license this thing that we had no involvement in, and then say that it's a Netflix original. That's different because the money only comes after the product is finished. Their money being injected at the beginning fundamentally shifts the project.
It's not just
I know
choices,
it's not that simple. I know that.
It's not just two choices, though. That's the thing, right? So my question is, I actually don't know about this Squid Game series because, as far as I know, this was born from a reaction to Mr. Beast doing his own Squid games. Right. And that went off gangbusters, and people didn't seem to have any problem with that, right? So at what point is it Netflix seeing that and going to somebody and saying, make this thing in this style for us? Or is it somebody else starting that and Netflix, who I don't think made Squid Games, right?
No.
So there's also another production.
Yeah, so that's another thing that, yeah.
Right. So it's this convoluted thing where it's like looking at Procter and Gamble and a soap that you bought that has their name on it. They are technically responsible for it, and I do agree with that. But there's so many lines down that the CEO of Procter and Gamble is not the one that's going to get in trouble for something that a soap that burns somebody's skin off down the line does, right? I mean, eventually it gets to a point where if that happens enough, so if we find out that there's a slew of reality shows that Netflix is producing that people are getting hurt on, then maybe that's a different conversation. But I just don't know. There's so much in between Netflix saying we're going to produce a show and then that show coming to fruition that I don't even know if Netflix has boots on the ground for this thing. And there's an assumption there because they put their name on it and yeah, that does mean that they have to take some responsibility in some regard. So I do think somebody should take responsibility for it. But I just don't think that means that the entirety of Netflix as a company is somehow tainted by some production company doing some bad fucking shit. They're just, if I were to feel that way, every movie making and television company out there has got something to answer for.
Oh yeah, I mean you decide the level that you're going to go to with anything in consumption. You've been talking a lot about being the informed consumer. It is knowing that everywhere down the line, the things you are consuming eventually has that negative aspect to it.
So it is produced by a company called Studio Lambert. Okay. That is the company making it. Netflix is not the name on the production.
Then yeah. So then it just sucks that because it's based on a Netflix show and you put Netflix in the headline, it's going to see more eyeballs.
Well, and again, Squid Game, not technically a Netflix show.
No, it was a Korean show that they did it. Yeah,
but that's the problem, right? This is the same shit when everybody wants to talk about how Netflix are bastards for the ways in which they treat teenagers on Riverdale. And I just want to slap anybody out there that has that conversation. But the problem is that outside of America, Netflix
is who runs
shows
Riverdale. Yeah.
as a Netflix original. It is titled as a Netflix original outside of America. So
Yeah.
like in other markets, they look at that and they see Netflix's Riverdale, but like that's just not how it works.
I mean, my big issue is with Mako Mermaids because I watched that. It's not really an issue, but it's how I understand what a Netflix original is. Because it's not that like now that Netflix is paying, it's not kind of boring stuff about mermaids. Like that's the nice thing about those shows is that
apparently the other big producers on it are for the reality show The Traitors. That like really weird like not the mole games, right?
with that is it Alan Cumming who's the host of that one?
I don't remember.
I don't know.
But
see
the
it.
producers of that, The Garden. So it's two production companies now that are not that are associated with Netflix for other Netflix stuff, but they're not Netflix, right? These are the companies, but everybody out there is going to call it Netflix's Squid Game reality show, and that's going to be the first thing
because it was going to air on Netflix. And I mean, I guess that's sort of the double-edged sword of it, right? You live by the sword of the fact that like once something is put on Netflix, people associate it with Netflix, right? It's name brand word association, but that also means even if something fails before you put it on there, because you've announced that you have it or that you're going to have it or you're even associated with the product, it becomes a Netflix product.
Yeah, and I think that where Netflix gets involved and how they react is important because like when this news first started coming out and Netflix was just like, don't be ridiculous, and then we found out it was true, that they should also answer for, because that did come directly from a Netflix PR department saying, no, that can't possibly be what's happening. And then they found out it was, and I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt in that scenario that they didn't know it was actually happening and just were just as caught off guard by the rest of us. But that's probably not the case, right? It's not that black and white. There is something in between. It's just it's this idea of wanting to stay informed when you're taking this shit in. Part of that is understanding that how companies and structures work. Like as much as we want to make capitalist bad guy Netflix, right? Like because they are the big company and their name is the thing on everything. At the end of the day, Netflix is not just like a company in a dark room making these decisions and then it just happens and comes into the world. There's a bunch of other factors involved here, especially because we're talking about art. We're not talking like when we talk about a product, at the end of the day, ideally the thing that is produced is artistic in some fashion, and that becomes a whole other thing. Is someone needs to answer for all of these people that got hurt with this Netflix the Squid Game shit, right? Like the level at which people were mistreated is unfathomable, and like I just cannot understand. Like in a weird way, there's this like sick part of me that wants to be like, they knew what they were signing up for when they signed up for Squid Games, but like no they fucking didn't, especially because some of the more glaring allegations for me are not necessarily the health stuff. That stuff is so beyond evil that like I can't even really kind of register that stuff right now. But like shit, like they cast this show, quote unquote, cast this reality show, flew all of these people over from all over the world to go do this thing in England. It was being filmed in England, and then like apparently people were reporting that they lost, and the tickets that they were given to go home were for like right after they lost, and it led to a bunch of people questioning, did you know I was going to lose? And there's all this stuff about like, hey, this might have been rigged. Like the ways in which they were prepared to send people home, the fact that influencers, quote unquote influencers, I don't know if they're like YouTube personalities or what, but there are apparently some people involved in the contestants that were just given free pass to go to levels without actually succeeding in the games and shit. We haven't seen the show yet, so I can't truly speak.
I don't know if we'll ever see the show. Is the aspect of that?
Maybe. I mean, the thing is, as far as I understand it, this is all coming out because they finished it and it's ready to go.
Right, but it's also one of those things where how poisonous is it?
I think that there's enough morbid curiosity in the world, because remember, this is something Netflix can put up for the world. I think there's enough morbid curiosity that they could put this up. You know, I also think of like, remember that prank show that Dustin there from Stranger Things hosted, and there was a lot of controversy.
I don't remember that.
Well, so there was a huge bunch of controversy when it first came out because before it came out, there was this reveal that one of the pranks was it was like a punk style show, and he had invited people to come in for a job under the impression that they were starting their first day of work, and then it was all fake. There was no real business, and they were just like they were being punked the entire time and like pranks, and they were like working in a crazy office, and then at the end of the day they found out it wasn't real and they were on a TV show, and a ton of people were just like, this is super shitty. Like, you're making people like interview and come in for a job and under the impression that they're working this job, and it's all fake. Like, sucks. Like, and all of this shit, right? Well, when it came out, that wasn't what was going on at all. People were showing up for like a 4-hour volunteer job. Like, they were just they had no intention.
They
of
knew
being
that
there
it
past
had an
that
end
day.
date.
They knew they knew that it was only going to be for a little bit of time. Some of them apparently didn't even expect payment. Like, there was all of this shit that wasn't part of the initial release, right? But it burned that show so bad that, to what you just said, they put it out and then it didn't go anywhere. So it's still available on Netflix, but guess what? That algorithm ain't never going to show it to you again. Same thing with Cuties. All of this shit that happened. They put it out, and even with all the shit that they got, they didn't ever take it down. They just let the algorithm just do what the algorithm does, and it buried it, right? And that they'll do the same thing with this because they're going to get their money out of it. They'll put it up. Enough people will watch it because they're curious or didn't hear about it or whatever, or maybe we'll find out that some of this stuff is because the other thing is that all of this has been based on the testimony of a handful of contestants. I would say like a dozen or so. I've seen different names, and not even like full names for some of them. John is like the only real name that's been kind of given out, and like Variety is like reporting all of this shit based on people who tried to remain anonymous. And I don't know why. If they were contestants on this show, what reason do they have to remain anonymous?
Well, if they signed like an NDA or something like that, they'd want to remain anonymous to make sure that they don't sever that contract.
Sure,
yeah,
sure. But like, if people are dropping dead around you to the point where you're like, I need to talk to Variety about this, how much are you concerned about that NDA? Because
I'm still concerned. I don't.
No, because the big thing about NDAs is NDAs are only enforceable if both parties are acting in good faith, and people dropping like flies around you for health reasons and being tortured, that's not this production company acting in good faith. That's not whoever this person is, right? Like, you signed that NDA under the impression you were going to go play a game and have a good time, not be mentally tortured and then keel hauled off of the fucking ship. That's not no, that NDA wouldn't stand.
I want to agree with you, but there's just too much known about how corporations function where they would want to be like, no, you signed the NDA, we're going to sue you. I don't care if it's going to look like bad publicity for us. You broke the law.
Name one person off the top of your head that broke an NDA that ended up destitute afterwards.
That's a good point. I guess that's it. Then what's the point of the NDA, CJ?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a scare tactic.
Yeah.
It's legalese bullshit to scare people. It's the same thing like a terms of service that you sign when you go into Netflix. Technically, they can hold you accountable to all that shit. But you break terms of service all the time by watching your Netflix at work. So, like, people break those kinds of contracts all the time.
And once I break the contract for something small, does every other breakage of the contract even matter? Or have I already severed it and there's no expectation that I would follow through on anything else?
No, I mean, this entire system is built on people just agreeing to be cool, right? Like, the entire legal system is built on people just agreeing to be cool. Like, it's all just agreements. There's nothing physically stopping people from behaving in these ways. It's just a social understanding. I would even say so far it's a social construct, right? Like, it's this whole idea that, like, we just do these things, but at some point that contract gets broken between you and this other person, and it's up to you to decide how you behave in that matter. Netflix has decided pretty obviously that they're not going to go after little fish when it comes to this kind of shit, and every time they make one of these changes to their TOS or to their FAQs about like what their TOS means and all this shit, like, people get fucking crazy about how like Netflix is coming for them next, and it's like, Netflix doesn't give a shit about you. Like, calm down. Like, unless you're out there like bootlegging stuff off of Netflix or like showing it in like a proscenium stage with 1,000 seats, like, they don't care. They just don't.
Yeah. As long as you're not taking money out of their pocket, they really don't care.
Well, and even if the money that you're taking is fucking chump change, they don't care. Like, you invite me over to your house to go watch something on Netflix. Netflix isn't going to come knock the door down and be like, you can't do that, because it doesn't matter to them.
But what if it happens organically? Like, you come over and I just started something on Netflix. I mean, like, the expectation is that I have to stop? I'm not in control of you coming over.
Yes.
I know. You should.
No, I mean, but I am in control of what you now watch on Netflix.
Oh, okay. Damn it. And that's why I shouldn't have shared my password. I love my Netflix password. That's the last thing I'm going to say on that one. Just because I've had to enter it so many times this week. Because it just reset everything. I don't know. I guess the other scary thing, and again, it's gone now, so you don't need to worry about it, was the idea that if you are accessing from other devices, they will add fees to your account.
Yeah,
that was also scary.
And that is where you start to scare people, right? Because that is a easy to do, not life threatening function, right? Like, they're not saying, hey, we're going to take you to court. They're just saying, hey, we picked up that you're doing this thing that breaks terms of service. We're just going to get back on the same page by charging you for this thing that allows you to do this instead. It's like, it's this weird thing though, where you're starting to introduce, like, fines are bullshit, because fines basically just establish two rules: those that can afford it and those that can't. Like, and so you basically said, hey, if you can afford to keep breaking our TOS, then go nuts. But if you can't, then you better pay attention to this shit, and that sucks. Like, that's
$2.99 a month is a lot less than having to have two $20 a month accounts.
Sure. Yeah.
That's just a fact. I mean, so you can.
Yeah, I like.
No, I'm not excusing
there are some people out there that don't even have that luxury, right?
No.
Then what do they do?
I'm not excusing it or saying it's a luxury or anything like that. What I'm saying is, like, that's the way that the people who do not care about that extra $2.99 are going to approach it. Until it also attacks your credit score for doing that to Netflix. I'm making myself sick with this stuff, and just how much control a subscription to watch movies, like some movies too, not even all the movies like it used to be, could just completely destroy your life.
Yeah, the veneer has just come off of, like, Netflix and the idea of a independent streaming service being able to corral and harangue all of these studios into playing nice. Because again, it was a construct. They were the only ones in the game at the time. The way that things looked, it was the smart move to work with them and all of that shit. But the second that image broke, and I don't know when that happened. Somebody out there probably could pinpoint it better than me. But there was a moment in which that image broke, and everybody else was like, we could just do that ourselves. Like, fuck this. Like, we're not going to play with these guys anymore. And I don't know where that line was. But the second that whole construction broke down, we then ended up in the situation that we're in now, where the studios are back to being in charge of their shit again. And even then, that's fucking weird. Because as we pointed out with HBO, that doesn't guarantee that shit's going to stick around. Like, just because WB is associated with HBO Max doesn't mean that all of WB's shit is always going to be available.
Yeah. If I had to point a finger, I would say the acquisition of Fox by Disney, because that really showed people how much Disney actually got in that acquisition.
Yeah, I think it was before that even, though, too. I think it was more something like Hulu really becoming a viable competitor. Somewhere in Hulu showing that they could keep up with Netflix, that Netflix didn't have some secret formula. They do technically have a secret formula. It's literally their algorithm. But, like, Netflix did not have the fucking, like...
They didn't have the only key to the kingdom.
Right. Like, the idea being that somebody else could do what Netflix was doing, it kind of opened the eyes and kind of really, made a lot of these companies kind of pay attention. Like, wait a minute, we had that option, right? Like, that idea. Like, definitely Disney then going on a rampage and buying up everybody, including Hulu, in order to, like, get it all, under their belt. Like, that definitely was it ramping up. But I do think that moment when everybody kind of really raised their eyebrows was when Hulu suddenly came out swinging.
Yeah, once Hulu had value, that's a good point. I just think that when you see, so Disney's like, I'm buying Fox. That's what I'm going to do. And they get everything. I think that makes these other companies be like, wait, what do we own right now? Right? Like, if we were to sell right now to Disney, what would Disney get from us? We have all of that? Why are we just selling it and not just making that money, cutting out the middleman?
Yeah.
And that, because it's, yeah, It feels like that one too, because you're not wrong. I thought that Hulu becoming more of a player in the game was after Disney had acquired them.
No,
I mean,
Disney only bought Fox and Hulu recently. Really, in the grand scheme
I thought
of things.
like 2014 is when that started getting talked about.
I don't,
Yeah, it has to have been, because by 2015 Disney did the movie with the Star Wars people. And wasn't that part of that?
So that could
That
be
came out
2014,
beforehand.
2015. But
Yeah.
then Hulu prescription service.
Yes, the Hulu prescription service.
Let's see when the Hulu subscription service started.
Yeah, I mean that happened that was in like 2010. Like
Right.
there was a
That's what
football
I mean.
game where it happened. But I feel like it didn't have value to me. Hulu was something I knew about but didn't show value to me until like season 3 of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. That's how I'm going to do that.
The reason why Hulu kicked off around us was because Netflix was where you went for old shit, Hulu was where you went for current
New shit, yeah.
Like that's so you kind of couldn't have one without the other for like a small period. There was a small time where they weren't quite competing with each other, so you kind of had to pay for both. And 2010 is when they announced that they were going to start allowing subscriptions. Technically they launched in 2007 as a streaming service, but that was back when they did like the ad supported.
Yeah.
But then they announced that they were going to do a streaming service. Holy shit. There is a $55 price tier for Hulu right now.
Yeah, it's with live TV included.
Yeah,
and you get a bunch of other stuff in the catalog. I know one person who did it, and they did it for sports. And that was after they had done all of their options and determined that live TV with Hulu was the best price for what they wanted. And I'm just like, this is cool. I like that it exists, but it's weird to go to Hulu and be like, let's see what's on CBS. And it just be given to you. Like, I can do it.
What's crazy about that is, like, there's so many free TV things out there, like Pluto, or Google has one of their own now, like that kind of thing, that, like, you can get CBS on those. Like, yeah, you have to put up with like a ton of shitty commercials, I guess. Maybe that's like the benefit.
Yeah.
But like you could watch that stuff. It's just weird that like we are living in a time in which everything is available to us if we want to pay a price, right? And listening to what certain people's like line is on their price is always fascinating to me.
Well, it doesn't help that it all comes right at once, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't help that Hulu, Disney Plus, Netflix, and freaking even Paramount Plus, which I know like nobody uses, all of them raised their prices right at the same time. So you just saw like where the value was. Netflix going from $15 to $20 was insane. As like, what's it? I'm thinking of like another one, like Disney Plus being like, we're $1 more a year.
Yeah,
Hulu, we're $1 more a year. Like, yeah.
I mean, well, but the thing about Hulu is like Disney Plus, I can't argue with. Like, yeah, their value there for the money is fine. With Hulu, though, it's that problem where you can say that they only raised it by $1, but as I just pointed out, they've got so many different tiers that you could be paying $50 to do Hulu a month if you wanted to be doing. That's ridiculous. I'd much rather spend my $20 on Netflix and then save that $30 and just watch some commercials during my CBS News in the morning.
Right. Well, I mean, you still have commercials with live TV. That's the other thing. It is live TV.
It's probably not as many as Pluto. I will say that.
So
Pluto pretty upsettingly has like 2 commercials that it shows, and it shows it like 8 times in a row between commercial breaks.
Yeah.
But
so
anyway.
there's that thing, and it's also, I think it's a separate stream. I think there's an online stream, and then there's the one that is given to like the TV networks, and then they get to do with it what they want to do with it. Because if you're streaming straight from CBS, yes, we go to commercial, and then that streaming service is then in charge of, they're essentially the TV network, but going through Hulu live TV, you're getting the feed from your local CBS. So you're seeing regular commercials. If I'm going to
watch commercials, they're going to be goddamn local.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's a thing. Because it's not just the 2 people who decided to advertise on Pluto this month and their commercials like repeated ad nauseum. You're paying for essentially a real life television experience delivered through Hulu.
No, I'm paying so I don't have to watch commercials. Thanks, Hulu.
Well, I mean,
That's why I'm paying.
they could, you could say that, but it doesn't change the fact that those commercials are still there. If you were getting live TV without commercials, that would be incredible.
No, I'm not going to be watching live TV, is what I'm saying.
Right,
If I'm going to
exactly.
be
No,
paying a certain amount of money to a company nowadays, I have too many options that are commercial free to put up with a just because it's a promise of live television, put up with that shit. I can't do it. Like
well,
I
and
said,
you don't watch football. You don't watch football every week. Where
yeah.
like if you don't have access to Fox or CBS, you don't have football until the nighttime.
Well, and then there's Amazon. Like
Right, but
Amazon's got
again,
their
but
whole thing where you can pay the NFL specifically to watch your games through them.
right, but I mean that's the difference that didn't exist before. Like
Yeah.
that was an answer to the Hulu Live TV. It all balances out. It's weird. I don't know.
We
I
don't
don't.
pay for YouTube TV in this house, but I've had it for years. We have a family member in a different house that pays for it, and they get so many devices, and they've like, we're only use one, so you guys can sign in on the rest. And so we've had YouTube Live TV for 4 years now, and it's been really cool to have that option. But I think we use it maybe once a month, if that. And it's just been where like we're sitting around like on a Saturday, and we just want to have Saturday morning cartoon experience or something.
Yeah, like I put on TBS. That's all I put on is TBS until Adult Swim time, and then Adult Swim is on. I will be
But there
full
are very
internet.
noticeably times where like channels will get blacked out because like during the Olympics this happened a lot where
Yeah,
like this event is for live TV customers only, or this event is for like YouTube streaming customers only or something like that. So like we could just go over to YouTube and watch it live, but we couldn't watch it on YouTube TV live, which was weird. It's just like
yeah.
this is the same fucking house,
It's
guys.
the
Why do I need
same
to go in a
shit. I
different
mean,
room?
it's all this is the biggest problem of the fiefdoms of the streaming, is that everything is divided up so much that you cannot get anything with just one service anymore.
Well,
And
I know we're running a little long in the tooth, but we also probably next week should talk a little bit about streaming devices because that's the other big thing that I've been dealing with in this house. With all the service stuff that's been going on, in the middle of that, I also had to get a hold of a new Chromecast because Sundance this year was only working on the last generation. I won't even say latest because I think it came out 3 years ago, but the latest generation Netflix, and not even I'm sorry, Chromecast, and not even the 4K internet like landline connected one that came with my Stadia controller. That was technically second generation.
yeah, that Stadia
So
controller one, I mean, RIP Stadia, we've talked about that whole thing. That was this like weird mid revision
yeah,
that even the one that came out afterwards could not connect to Stadia.
yep.
And I was just like, well, that makes no sense because now that I'm in this ecosystem, a Chromecast is appealing to me, and this new
Almost
version
like
is even better. But what?
Almost like we should have known that Google wasn't really in it for the long haul, and maybe they were just trying to do this thing where they just invented a technology they could license out to other people instead.
I mean, that was within 3 months. Frickins. Yeah, I'm not ready to talk. I also just got an Apple TV to try to simplify streaming in the house. So I think that this is a good place to like tease next week where we talk
Yeah,
about devices and our
yeah,
experiences with new devices for streaming.
for sure.
Yes. So is there anything else that you want to talk about before we send this one away?
Nah, not today. Part of me was like, we should go because the big game, but then I remember that's next. So that's
That
fine.
is next week, yes. And that's why on the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe podcast, we're going to be releasing The Longest Yard at the end of this week. So that you can watch you can listen to a football podcast right before you watch the big game.
Yeah, I got to decide if I want to do all of my like Tom Brady like discussions during longest yard or during our recording. Probably during our recording
I
because
think
that's
during the
really more of
recording, yeah,
my.
because has he made a decision yet? That's my
I mean, he's
favorite
officially
part.
retired.
No, no, no,
He's
no,
officially.
no. Okay, so the new one in the water, and might just be because it's local, I saw it on a local news broadcast, is the offer from Robert Kraft to have him sign as a Patriot for one day to retire as a Patriot.
Oh, I did not hear about that.
Yeah.
I will say that he's been doing the rounds on like YouTube, like checking in with like influencers and stuff to like just get his face back out there because he's trying to figure out what he's going to do now that he's not going to be footballing. He has been welcomed as a Patriot pretty much 90% of the time. Like, so I think that he probably will take that deal and probably will go down in history as a Patriot because even if he doesn't, he's going to be remembered that way. So
take the
might as
money
well
and
make
run,
that
right?
cash, right? Yeah, might as well make your ducats, right? Yeah. So no, I did not know about this, but considering that I have been seeing him like showing up on like cooking YouTubes and shit like that as like the former Patriot Tom Brady, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
The 80 for Brady that just came out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's him during the whole and New England era too. So
Yeah.
who knows? It's going to be interesting, but that is something that's in the water. And I've liked the reaction that I've heard from some people. Like, people do that all the time, and I'm like, yeah, but not Tom Brady, who like famously kind of broke up with the team. Like, you want to look at the team kind of appearing weak. Robert Kraft being like, please come back. Please come back so we can make money off of you. Like,
yeah, I don't know if I read it that way, but I'm also not in it, so maybe I'm not getting all the full context.
It
I
just
don't think
feels,
it seems like a weak offer from the Patriots. It sounds like them acknowledging.
It sounds like them
history in the way
acknowledging
that
it,
they
yeah,
do.
but it's
honestly, it sounds like an olive branch is what it sounds like.
well, if it were just the olive branch, then that'd be one thing. But the we'll do whatever we have to so that you'll sign with us to retire as a Patriot of it all.
Yeah, that does just stink of a little desperation.
Like, oh, okay. Tom, you should do it, but like, you should probably wait until you're getting both an Xbox Series X, a PS5, and the newer edition of Switch. Like, I want that in writing.
I'd be holding off for like a better settlement with Giselle, but anyway.
I would hold off. You know what? We can just give you Hyannis. That whole island belongs to you. Brady Annis.
We should hold off on the Brady talk till next week. We should save next week for
that'll be fun for that.
Devices. That'll be good. We can talk about where the hell we're going to try and watch this game, because in this house I only have streaming devices to choose from. I don't have a cable box. So.
Well then, well, I guess the last thing I want to talk about just on that stuff, if you are one of the people who has not seen the new Beavis and Butthead, and I imagine that's everybody, because again, I don't know anybody who subscribes to Paramount Plus besides me. I love Paramount Plus, but I know that nobody else is using it. New South Park is this week, and they're saying that they're following it up with new Beavis and Butthead. Is just the Paramount Plus Beavis and Butthead stuff. So go finally watch and consume it.
Nice.
Because I'm excited. I'm excited for people to get to see it. Because it's really good. I was really impressed with the new season on Paramount Plus. But also, because nobody notices Paramount Plus, the last thing on that is they just took away the Fairly Odd Parents reboot live-action television continuation. They just took it away. And nobody's talking about it.
Is it the one that had, what's his nuts in it, though? Drake?
No. Not
Drake
the movies. Those are actually probably still up. To be completely honest, I'll confirm that for next week. No, this new one, they showed the entire series on Nickelodeon. The finale just is airing next Thursday, but they've taken off all the episodes from Paramount Plus with no announcement or anything. Just like, yoink. And if they had done it before they were putting it on Nickelodeon, that would make sense. But they did it like 5 weeks into airing the show. Just disappeared it. So really nothing is safe. Not even like the original programming that they haven't even mentioned is going away. Because it could just disappear. And that's the craziest thing about it. But yeah, but more football, devices, and all that next week on the Say Report. This week, I hope you enjoyed it as we talked about the ill preparations of the non-informed consumer or, corporation, as the case may be. If you have anything you'd like to add to the discussion, and it's for Sejohn specifically, make sure that you mention him in the tweet. We are on Twitter at the Say Report, so we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and if you want to throw any more Tom Brady news at Devon, you can find him at Devon D. Decker. Just send him all of the Tom Brady picks you got.
I am willing to have this discussion about Tom Brady right now. I have a poster of this guy in my bedroom. You're telling me I don't want this? On that referential note, William, please bring us home. Have a good one, folks.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.